Hi everyone, welcome back to Paranormal M. Tonight I'll be sharing a few strange stories with you. Before we get into them, make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And if you've had any paranormal experience that you can't explain, feel free to send it to me. Our first story starts on a normal night, after the storyteller stayed up late finishing assignments. But after waking up to the sound of pigeons, the night slowly became something they would never forget. Now, get comfortable, and I hope you sleep well tonight. I remember it started as a completely ordinary night. I had stayed up way too late finishing some assignments, and by the time I finally got into bed, it was around 2 in the morning. I was tired, but not the kind of tired where you just disappear into sleep. It was that restless kind, where your body wants to shut down, but your mind keeps pacing around like it forgot something. Then, sometime around 3, I woke up to the sound of pigeons outside my window. I know the time because there's a clock hanging right across from my bed. It's one of the first things I see whenever I open my eyes. I remember staring at it, feeling annoyed and uneasy, because I already knew falling back asleep was going to be difficult. My room has a window right behind my bed. I usually keep it open for fresh air, but because there are so many pigeons around the building, I have this thin, removable mesh screen covering it. It's not something I touch often unless I'm cleaning it. That night, after waking up, I started sweating for no clear reason. I kept turning under my blanket, trying to calm myself down. Eventually, after a lot of effort, I drifted off again. And then, I heard someone calling my name. In the dream, it felt close. Too close. Like the voice wasn't coming from far away, but from right behind me. I turned toward the window. There was this pale figure standing there. White, almost blurred, with no clear face. I couldn't make out any eyes or mouth, but somehow I knew it was looking at me. Then, it grabbed my hand. That's the part I still can't explain properly, because I felt it. I felt the touch. I felt the pressure around my wrist. It started pulling me toward the window, and somehow my hand was already outside, through the opening. And then I woke up. The clock said exactly 4:15. I just lay there for a moment, frozen. I was too scared to move, too scared to look behind me. But eventually I forced myself to check the window. The mesh screen looked like it had been pulled open from the inside. I don't mean slightly loose. I mean it looked like someone had forced it out of place. And I knew I hadn't touched it. I barely ever touched it. After sitting there and overthinking every possible explanation, I called my dad. He came to my room and I told him everything. He said maybe I had done it in my sleep. But that didn't make sense to me. I sleep almost completely still, wrapped up like a mummy. I cover my whole body with a thin blanket, except for my head. And when I woke up, everything was exactly the same. My hands were still tucked inside the blanket. My dad fixed the mesh and told me to try to sleep again. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare. Then, about a month later, it happened again. That night, I had gone to bed earlier because I was exhausted. I woke up to the sound of pigeons flapping their wings outside. This time, I immediately sat up on my bed and checked the window. The mesh was perfectly attached. It wasn't loose. It wasn't hanging. It was secure. No wind could have pushed it open. I checked it carefully, then lay back down. And then I fell asleep. Once again, I heard someone calling my name. It wasn't like a normal dream. I've had dreams before where I know I'm dreaming, where I can control things a little. This was different. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even look at certain things in my room, like my clock. The voice made me turn around. That same whitish figure was there again. This time, I think it might have had a face, but I can't remember it clearly. Maybe my mind blocked it out. Maybe I just don't want to remember. Then it grabbed my arm. Just like before, it started pulling me toward the window. The second I felt that pull, I woke up. The clock said 4:15 again. I turned and looked at the window. One corner of the mesh was pushed inward, like something from outside had pressed it in. There was an opening big enough for my arm to fit through. And that's what terrified me the most. I live on the 5th floor. There is no way someone could have been outside my window doing that. I left the room and went straight to my dad. He came back with me, stood in front of the window, and didn't say anything for a while. He just stared at it. Then he told me to come sleep in his room. My mom asked what happened, but my dad only said we would talk about it in the morning. The next day, he asked me to explain everything again, slowly and in detail. I told him about the pigeons, the voice, the figure, the pulling, the time, and the mesh. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He didn't say I imagined it. He just told me that if I ever heard pigeons waking me up again at that hour, I should not go back to sleep. He said I should call him, get up, do anything, but not let myself drift off right away. He also admitted that it was strange and that he had no explanation for why it was happening. After that, he bought me an extra thin curtain to cover the window and the mesh. Since then, it hasn't happened again. But sometimes, even now, I still wake up around 3 in the morning to the sound of pigeons outside. And every time I hear them, I remember that window. I remember the hand around my wrist. And I remember the clock. 4:15. I never used to be the kind of person who truly believed in ghosts. I mean, if someone asked me, I'd usually say, yeah, maybe. Because honestly, why not? The world is strange enough. But deep down, I didn't really believe there were spirits wandering around houses or anything like that. I believed it was possible, sure, but not something I expected to actually happen to me. And then I stayed at my Nana's house. Her place isn't some crumbling old manor with vines crawling up the windows. It's actually pretty modern, just really big. Big enough that when family came down to visit, all 10 of us could fit without it feeling too cramped. There were babies, cousins, my aunt, everyone. Nana was happy to have the house full, but there still weren't enough beds, so I ended up sleeping on an air mattress in the living room. This all started a few nights ago, on May 24th, 2026. That night, I was lying there with the fan on because the room was warm, watching TV sometime around midnight, or maybe closer to 1 in the morning. I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't check the exact time. I was watching one of those creepy true crime mystery videos, the kind you put on even though you know it's going to make every shadow in the room feel suspicious. Everyone else seemed asleep. The house was completely still. Then, out of nowhere, this loud, sharp beeping started. It wasn't a soft little chirp like a smoke alarm battery dying. It was shrill, screechy, painfully loud. It sounded like it was coming from just outside the living room door. At the exact same time, the internet cut out and the video froze. I just lay there frozen for a second, trying to understand what I was hearing. It was so loud that my ears actually hurt. I was just about ready to get up and run to where my mom was sleeping, even though she was all the way across the house, through 2 halls, past the kitchen, and down by the bedrooms. Then it stopped. Just like that. My heart was absolutely hammering. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe an alarm. Maybe the router. Maybe some weird electrical thing. So I turned off the TV and tried to fix the internet box beside it, standing there in the dark, still shaken. That's when I heard the banging. Thud. 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 And And I need you to understand this part, because it's what really got to me. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It wasn't from the walls. It was coming from underneath me. I felt it through the floor, through the air mattress, like something below the living room was knocking upward. The banging got louder for a few seconds, then it stopped too. Same as the beeping. No fade, no explanation, just silence. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I asked my mom if she'd heard anything during the night. The beeping, the banging, any of it. She just looked confused and said she hadn't heard a thing. I explained exactly what happened, and she gave me that look people give when they're trying to be kind, but also think you were probably half asleep. She said maybe I'd been tired and imagined it. I wanted that to be true. I really did. But I know what I heard. And more than that, I know what I felt under the air mattress. I asked my sister and her boyfriend too, because they were sleeping upstairs, not far from where I was. They heard nothing either. That bothered me even more. My mom's room was pretty far away, so maybe I could understand her missing it. But upstairs? The beeping was so loud, I don't understand how they didn't wake up. Then it happened again on May 25th. Same beeping, same internet cutting out, same horrible banging under the floor. And again, nobody else heard anything. The silence afterward was almost worse than the noise, because it made the whole thing feel personal, like it was only happening for me. I still didn't have my phone nearby when it started, so I couldn't record it. But judging by the sky outside, it felt like it happened around the same time as the night before. Then came May 26th. This time, I did have my phone, and when it started again, I checked the time. It was 1:11 a.m. I wish I could say I recorded it, but I panicked. I just froze. The beeping filled the room, the banging started beneath me, and all I could do was sit there with my heart in my throat. Tonight, I'm going to try again. I'm keeping my phone close, and if it happens, I'm going to record it the second it starts. I know how this sounds. I know there are probably rational explanations, and honestly, I want one. I don't want to believe my Nana's house is haunted. But something is happening in that living room. And whatever it is, it's loud enough to terrify me, but somehow quiet enough that no one else in the house can hear it. So this happened back in the late 2000s in downtown San Diego. A friend of mine, Darren, had moved into this ridiculously cheap apartment in an old building just above one of our favorite underground bars. The place was called O'Malley's, mostly because the guy who owned the bar also owned the apartments upstairs, and everybody just treated the whole building like one strange, creaky little kingdom. The building itself was old, maybe 4 stories, built sometime in the 1930s, tucked not too far from Golden Hill. And the thing about it was, people said that back in the 60s and 70s, it had been kind of a crash pad for addicts, drifters, and people who had nowhere else to go. Over the years, a lot of people had died in those rooms. So, naturally, everybody said the place was haunted. And honestly, I believe it was. I stayed over there a lot back then. We were all in our late 20s, still living that half-broke, half-wild city life. At first, the strange stuff was small enough that you could almost talk yourself out of it. Doors would slam when there was no draft. Lights would flick on and off right in front of me. I remember turning off the bathroom light, stepping back, and watching the switch click itself right back up. Not a soft little wiggle either, a full, deliberate click. Then there were the footsteps. You would hear what sounded like a whole crowd pounding down the hallway outside the apartment. Heavy feet, fast, like people rushing the stairs. I would yank the door open, expecting to see somebody, anybody, but the hall would be empty. And the way the stairs were set up, if actual people had been running past, I would have seen them turning the corner or heading down to the next floor. But there was never anyone there. That kind of thing happened all the time. The moment that really stayed with me, though, happened one afternoon when I was there by myself. Darren was at work, and I was sitting in the tiny living room watching an old mystery show with the kitchen behind me, separated by this little half wall. Out of nowhere, I heard drawers sliding open, then cabinets. Then the kitchen faucet blasted on full force. I called out, thinking maybe Darren had come home early. Nothing. No answer. No sound of the front door opening either, and in that apartment, you absolutely would have heard it. That door had a heavy latch and a floorboard right inside that complained every time somebody stepped on it. I sat there frozen for a few seconds, and I could feel every hair on my arm standing up. I called his name again. Still nothing. Eventually, I forced myself to get up and look into the kitchen. Several drawers were open. A couple of cabinet doors were hanging wide. The faucet was running hard into the sink. And there was no one there. Nobody had come in. Nobody had gone out. I was alone in that apartment, standing there with the water roaring and this awful feeling that I had just walked in on something I was not supposed to see. That building had a presence to it. Not just one ghost either. It felt crowded in a way. Like there were layers of people still lingering there, each one carrying whatever they had brought with them from life. I never really felt hatred from them, though. That is the strange part. It did not feel evil to me. Sad, maybe, restless, sometimes almost desperate. It felt like they wanted to be noticed, like they wanted someone to understand they were still there. After a while, I started speaking out loud whenever something happened. I would say, "I know you're here. I'm sorry if I'm in your space. I don't mean you any harm." And I meant it. Because whatever those spirits were, I always had the sense they were trapped more than threatening. Like they were tied to that place by old hunger, old pain, old habits they could not put down. That apartment above O'Malley's was one of the strangest places I have ever spent time in. I do not expect everyone to believe it, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And I know I was not alone up there. I still remember the dream I woke from that evening. It wasn't really a dream, not the kind that disappears the moment you open your eyes. It stayed on my skin. I saw feathers falling from the sky, torn little pieces drifting down over gray ground. There were bullet shells everywhere, shining faintly like dead insects in the last light of day. Then I woke up. The ceiling fan was turning above me, slow and tired, as if even it had lost interest in going in circles. I looked at the clock. 4:30 in the afternoon. That meant I had 6 hours before the park. 6 hours before 10:40. My name is Kamalish. Years ago, people used to call me a detective. Not in the grand way. I was never famous. But people remembered me. They lowered their voices when they said my name, as if intelligence itself required whispering. "You're a clever man, Kamalish." I heard that sentence often back then. Now it sounded like something left behind in an old room. I was almost 60, and by then I had learned one uncomfortable truth about life. Sometimes we do not become what we love. Sometimes we become what we failed to finish. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. "So tell me, Detective Kamalish," I said softly, "after all these years, what exactly did you solve?" The answer was nothing I wanted to hear. I had come close many times, painfully close, but truth had always stopped just before my hand reached it. On my refrigerator, there was an old sticker of a hippopotamus with its mouth wide open. A tiny butterfly sat on its nose. The hippo could crush it in a second, but I had always believed the butterfly would escape just in time. That was detection, I thought, not brilliance, not courage. Timing. Knowing when to stay still, knowing when to fly. I drank some cold water and looked at the newspapers spread across my table. Again, the headlines belonged to the park killer. 5 people dead, all homeless. 3 women who sold flowers in the daytime and slept outside at night. 2 beggars. Each of them poisoned first, then killed quietly. The city was frightened, of course. Television anchors shouted. Politicians demanded action. Everyone suddenly cared about danger. But nobody had cared about the people while they were alive. Then the doorbell rang. 1 firm press. 1 weak second touch. Inspector Samuel. Nobody else rang a bell as if he were interrogating it. He came in carrying food packets and bottles of cola. He looked older than the last time I had seen him properly. His hair had retreated, his stomach had advanced, and his face carried the permanent irritation of a man who believed the world owed him obedience. "At your age," I told him, "you should be drinking whiskey, not cola." He dropped onto the sofa. "There's pressure from every side," he said. "You have to help me." I looked at him for a moment. "I don't fully understand the murders yet," I said, "but someone wants the city afraid. That much is clear." And just like that, another case came back to me. 20 years earlier. Back then, Samuel was a young police officer, and I was trying to become a great detective. We still believed truth could win if you chased it hard enough. That was the year women from the red light district started dying. Each one was found with a bullet wound on the forehead and a white rose placed in her hand. The newspapers gave the killer a name: the White Rose Butcher. I had nearly solved it. A wealthy old man, bitter and dying, had lost his son to illness. Grief had turned inside him and become hatred. He blamed sex workers. He hunted them. He arranged their deaths like rituals. I found patterns. I found motives. I found enough pieces to build the shape of the truth. And then the system arrived. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses forgot what they had said. Senior officers grew quiet in the wrong way. In the end, the police arrested a mentally unstable truck driver. A week later, he was found hanging in prison. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, convenience. The rich old man died soon after, supposedly from a fall. The killing stopped. The police congratulated themselves. The file slept. But old files do not really sleep. They breathe under the floorboards. Samuel sat across from me that evening, staring at my aquarium. One small golden fish kept circling a plastic soldier holding a tiny rifle. Round and round. History has a nasty habit of doing that. Then Samuel said something strange. Tiona blocked me. I looked at him. Tiona Rai, journalist. My former wife. There are names that do not enter a room quietly. Hers still struck furniture inside me. Samuel said they had argued online. She had criticized the police. He had tried to explain pressure, manpower, politics. Then she blocked him. I did not ask why he was telling me this. Some questions are snakes. Better not touch them unless you are ready for teeth. Tiona had once believed in me. Or perhaps she had believed in the version of me I advertised. We married young enough to mistake hunger for destiny. Later, she left for Mumbai with another journalist named Arindam, and the person who introduced them was Sanyal. That evening, I lit a cigarette and stared at the smoke. On the 7th page of the newspaper, small headlines described other deaths. Lovers killing lovers, husbands poisoning wives, wives stabbing husbands, people destroying the very hands they once held. And I suddenly remembered something the falsely accused truck driver had told me 20 years ago. People are frightened creatures, he said. That is why they hide inside shells. Tiona had once said something similar, though more gently. Happiness is like a glass of water, she told me during a rainstorm. Clear for a moment, then life throws it into a washing machine. I used to laugh at lines like that. Now I understood them. Life is brief, terribly brief. We barely have time to love each other properly. So where do we find the time to kill? Sanyal leaned forward then, impatient. You're getting old, Kamalish, he said. You've lost your sharpness. Why is this taking so long? Outside, birds were crossing the evening sky. The clouds had turned blue and copper and silver, stitched together by fading light. For one moment, I wanted to leave everything and simply watch the sky. But Sanyal was still speaking. At least tell me how we proceed. I said, the motive is the key. Why kill people who own nothing, threaten nobody, and will not be missed by anyone powerful? Find that answer, and the rest begins to crack. Sanyal smiled bitterly. It's always the weak who die first. 2 hours later, he left. 30 minutes after that, I took my revolver from the drawer. For 3 days, handwritten notes had been appearing in my old mailbox. Nobody used that mailbox anymore, which made the notes feel even more personal. The first said, "You came alone. You will leave alone, but words remain." The second said, "Meet me." The third said, "Come to the park at 10:40 p.m. That time mattered. 20 years earlier, the White Rose killings had also happened between 10 and 10:40 at night. Only the hunting ground had changed. Then, it had been brothels, empty roads, and dark alleys. Now, it was parks. I walked through the city slowly. In a small town, 10 at night already feels like midnight. Add a serial killer, and silence becomes a locked door. 2 stray dogs slept beneath a yellow street lamp. The park gate opened with a tired creak. No police. That was strange. A patrol jeep passed nearby without stopping. And then I knew. Someone was behind me. Not close, not far, just near enough for the air to change. Then I smelled perfume. Old perfume. The same kind I remembered from the body of the first woman killed 20 years ago. For some reason, I felt unbearably tired. Not frightened, just tired. Then the rope came around my throat. It tightened so fast I had no time to reach my gun. I fell backward, choking, dragged across the ground like an animal. The perfume grew stronger. Through my blurred vision, I saw a figure in black cloth. Then someone struck him from the side. Hard. The attacker stumbled. Before he could run, men came out from the darkness. Plain clothes. Detective branch. Armed and ready. I got to my feet slowly, coughing, breathing like my lungs had been dragged over gravel. Then I looked at the masked man. "It's over, Sanyal," I said. No one moved. The mask was pulled away. And there he was, Inspector Sanyal. 20 years earlier, his uncle Murganka had been involved in the White Rose murders. That much I had known. But Sanyal had done more than protect the family name. He had buried evidence, shifted blame, fed the department a convenient monster because dead women from the margins were easy to forget. But guilt does not always die. Sometimes it ferments. Sometimes it learns new habits. "You arranged the patrols," I told him. "You made sure certain parks were empty at certain times. You created fear, then walked through it wearing authority like a coat." One of the younger officers asked me, very quietly, "Sir, how did you know?" I looked up at the moon. "I'm not sure I knew," I said. "Not at first. Maybe I only kept walking until the truth got tired of hiding. But even as I said it, another memory returned. The first woman from 20 years ago. Her room had been full of scraps of paper, little handwritten fragments, symbols, half-finished sentences, and the rose in her hand had not been perfectly white. There had been a dark stain near the stem. Black paint, the same color as my old mailbox. That was when the final thought came to me, a colder thought. What if the old case had never been one case? What if the first murder had been committed by someone else? What if Murganka had copied it afterward? I turned back to Samuel. "So tell me," I whispered, "was your uncle really the first killer?" The wind moved through the park. Above us, birds crossed the moonlit sky, small and silent, like torn pieces of memory still trying to find their way home. And for the first time in 20 years, Inspector Samuel looked truly afraid. So this happened on a Sunday night. My girlfriend and I had gone out to dinner at Jay's, mostly because we wanted to sit outside, enjoy the patio, and just have a quiet evening together. But as soon as we were getting into the car, I noticed she had brought along our ghost hunting backpack. And when I saw that, I knew exactly what kind of night it was going to be. Over dinner, we started talking about where we should go afterward. We both felt like there was still something unfinished around St. Augustine School and the old church nearby. So after we ate, we ended up back on 6th Avenue, near those hidden steps by the abandoned church. We set out the EMF readers and a couple of cat balls, just to see if anything would respond. We introduced ourselves again, made it clear we meant no harm, and pretty quickly the EMF reader started lighting up. Yellow, then orange. It felt like something was actually listening. We asked if whoever was there wanted to speak through the spirit box, and the EMF flashed orange, almost like a yes. Then my girlfriend asked if the spirit had been connected to the Catholic Church, and through the spirit box, we heard a clear, unmistakable yes. We got another response after that, but then the energy started fading. So we thanked whoever was there, set our boundaries, and moved on. After that, we walked through Armory Park with the spirit box and EMF reader still running. My girlfriend wanted to pass by what we call the cat house, because there's usually this one cat there that she likes. That night, there was just one curled up on the porch swing, tucked away from the light rain. We kept walking our usual route, but nothing was really happening. The readings were quiet. I was already thinking we might just turn the corner and head back. Then I looked behind me and realized my girlfriend had stopped. She was standing at this front gate, and I immediately recognized the place. It was the same house she had told me about before, the one where she said she always felt a strong pull. We had tried checking it out a few nights earlier, but there were power lines and electrical boxes nearby, so the EMF readings had been too messy to trust. But this time was different. She leaned toward the gate with the EMF reader pointed straight at the house, and it started lighting up green. Then she said, very calmly, "I know you're here." She looked at me and said, "We have to go in." Then she opened the gate and said, "You want me to come in, don't you?" The EMF reader turned orange. She kept going. She said, "You've been wanting me to come in and talk to you." And right then, I heard what sounded like a little girl shriek. It was quick, but it went straight through me. I looked toward the front door, and for a second, I saw something. The only way I can describe it is a small gray and white shape, almost like a child-sized silhouette. It blended into the darkness, and then it was gone. I let my girlfriend lead. As soon as she stepped onto the stairs leading up to the brick porch, everything felt darker. Not just dim, heavy, like the whole place had swallowed the light around us. We checked the area first to make sure no one was hiding there. Then I sat on the ledge and she sat on the stairs with the EMF reader still in her hand. It kept bouncing between green and orange. She started speaking gently, like she was talking to someone scared. She said, "I felt like I was supposed to come here. I felt like I needed to connect with you." Then she started asking questions. "Are you a girl?" The EMF hit yellow. Then she asked, "Are you an older woman?" This time it jumped from orange to red. My girlfriend was locked in. She really felt like something was there with her, answering, but I was starting to feel terrible. Out of nowhere, I got nauseous. My head started pounding, almost like a migraine was coming on. I felt like I might throw up, but I didn't want to interrupt what was happening. Then my girlfriend got chills. She asked, "Are you behind me?" She stood up and turned toward the door, and immediately she said, "Oh my God, you're right there." She saw a round, grayish orb near the doorway, and then it vanished. She looked back at me and could tell I wasn't okay. She asked if I was all right, and I told her I felt sick, but I wanted her to keep going. She asked a few more questions, trying to figure out if the spirit was a mother, or maybe a sibling, or a child. The EMF hovered around green and yellow. Then I noticed a couple walking past the house, so I quietly warned her. She stopped talking and waited until they were gone. After that, she decided to close the conversation. She thanked whoever was there, told them we meant no harm, and set firm boundaries before leaving. By then, I was gagging. I honestly felt like I was about to vomit. We got out of there and made it back to the car. She knew I wasn't doing well, so we didn't talk much right away. When we got home, I took some medicine, showered, and we ordered food. Once I felt a little more grounded, we finally sat down to review the recordings. And that's when things got even stranger. At the beginning of the interaction at the house, while my girlfriend was speaking to whatever was there, we heard a child's voice on the recording. Clear as day. It said, "Mommy?" We also caught the little girl's shriek I had heard earlier. There were a couple of other responses too, short ones that sounded like, "Yeah," but we're still going through those. After that, we had to stop for the night, because whatever happened on that porch didn't feel like a random noise or a trick of the equipment. It felt like someone had been waiting for her to come in. Let me tell you a story I've always found both strange and fascinating. In old Thai folklore, people spoke of a creature called the Sua Sameng, a were-tiger, and there were said to be two kinds. The first was a real tiger of the forest, one that had grown old, cunning, and dangerous. After taking many human lives, people believed a dark spirit could enter it, giving it an almost human awareness. But the second kind was even more unsettling. This was not a tiger becoming something more human. It was a human being becoming a tiger. According to old beliefs, a person who studied forbidden magic could learn the art of changing form. With the right spell, the right ritual, or even a sacred oil, he could turn his body into that of a tiger and roam the deep forest as something no longer fully man. Now, this was not only a village tale whispered beside cooking fires. One account was connected to the royal journey of King Chulalongkorn during his visit to Chanthaburi in 1876. At that time, Chanthaburi was surrounded by thick, shadowy forest. Wild animals were everywhere: deer, elephants, and especially tigers. There were so many tigers that the governor had the constant duty of protecting villagers from attacks. And these were not distant threats. People said tigers sometimes came right into homes and dragged people away. The fear became so heavy that villagers were afraid to work, travel, or even move about freely. So the governor gathered skilled forest men and gave them firearms. Others built tiger traps. A serious hunt began, and many tigers were killed or driven far back into the wilderness. For a little while, people could breathe again. But then another fear rose up. Rumors spread that a Sua Sameng, a were-tiger, had appeared in the district. The story said that in the Khmer lands, there had been a master of occult magic who made a special oil of transformation. 3 of his students secretly used it on themselves and changed into tiger form. They wandered into Chanthaburi, and one of them became especially savage, killing several people in nearby areas. The master followed after them and warned the villagers. He told them that if they met one of these tiger men, they should strike it with a carrying pole or cover its footprints with a coconut shell. That, he said, might force it back into human form. But there was one terrible condition. If the tiger had already tasted human flesh, then it could no longer return. Something inside it had crossed a line. The man was lost, and only the beast remained. Now, even the king himself seemed unsure whether these stories were true. He recorded them, but you can feel a little skepticism in his words, almost as if he was saying, "This is what people believe, but who can say what really happened?" And there was another story from Satahip. The king once sent soldiers to fetch fresh water from a pond a short distance inland. Local people warned them not to go because a were-tiger had been seen nearby. They said a monk, who was supposedly the creature's master, had followed it through the night and was sitting beneath a sugar palm near the pond, waiting for a chance to turn his student back into a man. The soldiers were frightened enough to return and report what they had heard. The king wanted to see this monk for himself, but it was already late. By morning, the monk had vanished. And as for whether the tiger had eaten him or not, no one could say. That is what makes these old stories so haunting to me. They stand right at the edge between history and legend. There are royal records, real places, real fears, and yet at the center of it all is something wild and impossible. Maybe the were-tiger was only a way for people to explain the terror of man-eating tigers. Or maybe, in those deep forests of Chanthaburi, people truly believed that some men could surrender themselves to darkness and walk the earth in another skin. Either way, the story of the Sua Sameng still lingers, half in the jungle, half in the human heart. I was about 6 years old when this happened. I'm in my 30s now, and even after all this time, I can still picture it so clearly. My mom had been taken into the local hospital because she was unwell, and she ended up staying there for a few days. On one of those visits, my uncle drove my dad, my grandmother, and me to see her. When we got there, visiting hours hadn't started yet, so my dad went off to get us something to eat. My gran stayed with me in the waiting area. That's where we met him. There was an older man sitting nearby, with a pair of crutches resting against the bench beside him. He was warm, funny, and easy to talk to. Even as a little kid, I remember liking him straight away. My gran seemed to like him too. She spoke with him for a while, really properly spoke with him, the way adults do when they somehow fall into a conversation that feels like it was waiting for them. He told us he was there visiting his wife. The thing I remember most, apart from how kind he seemed, was that every so often he would reach for his crutches and force himself up. It clearly hurt him. You could see it in his face and in the way his body moved. But still, every 10 minutes or so, he made himself stand and shuffle around a little, as though he had to keep moving. The next day we went back to the hospital. I ended up in the same waiting area again, sitting in almost the exact same place, with my gran beside me. And the old man was there again. But this time, everything was different. He wasn't sitting down. He was standing, propped on his crutches, but he didn't seem to be in pain anymore. There was no strain in him, no discomfort. And around him was this beautiful golden light. I don't mean a little glow from a window or a reflection from the floor. I mean he looked as if he was wrapped in it. It stretched around him, soft and bright, almost like a shining outline. It made him look peaceful, almost regal, and he was staring right at me. I remember asking him, completely randomly, whether he had a Sega Mega Drive. I was 6, so that felt like a perfectly normal thing to ask an old man in a hospital waiting room. My gran didn't look at him. She didn't answer him. She just looked at me and said something like, "Your game? No, love, we couldn't bring that with us. This is the hospital." Her voice was strange, flat, almost sharp. Not cruel exactly, but colder than she usually was with me. The old man spoke to her then. I can't remember the exact words, only that he was trying to make conversation. She ignored him completely. That confused me more than anything. The day before, she had been happily chatting away to him. Now she was acting like he wasn't there at all. I looked at her, waiting for her to acknowledge him, waiting for her to laugh or answer or say something that proved we were all seeing the same thing. But she didn't. He just stood there, leaning on his crutches, looking almost hurt by it. Not angry, just sad. Like being ignored genuinely upset him. Then my dad came back with food, and my gran spoke to him normally. She spoke to me normally. She spoke to a member of hospital staff. Everything around us carried on exactly as it should have. Except for the man. When it was time to go up to my mom's room, we walked away from him as if he had never been standing there at all. I kept looking back. He watched me the whole time as I was being led away. He looked worried, deeply worried, and that golden light around him stayed there, soft and bright, like silk catching the sun. At the time, it felt as though he was watching someone precious leave him behind, like he was losing one of his own. I still think about that look. I replay it in my head more often than I'd like to admit. The following day, we visited my mom again, but I didn't see him, and for some reason, I never brought it up. Not to my dad, not to my mom, not to my gran. At least, I have no memory of ever mentioning it. Not until years later. About 13 or 14 years after it happened, my gran was very unwell with advanced vascular dementia. Most conversations with her had become difficult. She would drift in and out, and it was rare to get much connection from her. Still, I used to sit with her and talk, trying to reach whatever part of her I could. One day, I told her about the hospital. I told her about being little, about waiting to visit my mom, about the old man with the crutches. I told her how he had been friendly the first day, and how the next day he had been standing there glowing gold, while she acted like she couldn't see him. And then she changed. She locked eyes with me, which, by that point, almost never happened. Her attention was suddenly clear in a way I hadn't seen for a long time. And she said, "That Taffy had bad legs, but once he got talking, he was hard to get rid of." That was all. Later, I found out his name was Thomas Taffy Wilkins. He had been a local acquaintance of my gran's. He died the same night my mom was admitted to hospital. The same night we first met him. He had gone home after visiting his wife, had a bad fall, and died there. His wife remained on the same ward as my mother for the next few days. And all these years later, I still don't know what I saw in that waiting room. I see this kind of thing online all the time. Someone grabs a camera, a flashlight, maybe one of those little blinking gadgets, and heads off to investigate the haunted, abandoned place in town. An old school, a closed hospital, a burned-out house, a factory that hasn't made anything but dust in 30 years. Where I grew up, the spot was an old train station. It used to be a big deal for local ghost hunters. People posted pictures and videos all over the forums, claiming they'd caught shadow figures, ghost children, whispers from the dark, all of that. And I get why the place had a reputation. It was huge, echoey, half-rotted, and sitting in one of the roughest parts of town. The kind of building that already feels like it's holding its breath before you even step inside. But honestly, a lot of those shadow people probably weren't ghosts at all. They were probably people with nowhere else to sleep. And I'm not saying that to mock anyone who believes in ghosts. That's not really the point. I'm also not here to judge people who are unhoused. They're human beings. Everyone deserves a safe, quiet place to rest. Just imagine it for a second. You've lost your home. You're exhausted, cold, maybe scared, and you find shelter in this old train station because it's the only place you can get out of the wind for a while. You finally find a corner where you might be able to close your eyes. Then, out of nowhere, some guy bursts in with a flashlight bright enough to peel paint off the walls, a camera in your face, and a bunch of noisy equipment. He starts yelling, "Is anyone here? Can you tell me your name? How did you die?" And you're just lying there thinking, "I'm not dead. I'm trying to sleep." Then the light swings toward you, and of course you get up and try to move away. Anyone would. But now he sees your shadow on the wall and thinks he's caught evidence of a spirit. So he either starts chasing you, screaming, or runs away screaming, and the whole thing ends up online. Meanwhile, you've had to leave the only shelter you had for the night. Or you spend hours hiding from people who came there for entertainment and left thinking they had a paranormal experience. And now think about this part. A lot of people experiencing homelessness are young. Some are teenagers. Some are children. So picture being a kid with nowhere safe to go, curled up in some freezing old building, and then a grown adult comes stomping through the dark, shouting questions at the dead, shining lights around, and maybe chasing after you because he thinks you're a ghost. That's not spooky. That's heartbreaking. So I really think we should leave abandoned places alone. Ghost hunt in places where people live, work, visit, or have actually agreed to let that happen. Places with permission. Places with rules. Places where you aren't accidentally terrifying someone who already has enough to survive. And funny enough, once that old train station was cleaned up and turned into a farmer's market, the ghost evidence almost disappeared. The shadow figures stopped showing up. The ghost children vanished, which probably says more than people want to admit. And honestly, even if it had been ghosts the whole time, maybe the same rule still applies. If something is hiding in an abandoned place, ghost or not, maybe it just wants to be left alone. Hey there. I want to share a story that's really close to my heart. Something about why my grandparents always warned me to stay out of the attic. I grew up on a quiet farm, raised by my grandparents after my parents passed away in a tragic car accident. Life was simple. No TV, just me outside helping with chores, feeding animals, and tending crops. My grandparents sold what we grew and raised at the local market about half an hour away. They were gentle, loving folks who let me roam and explore freely, even giving me a phone when I turned 13. But there was one rule they never bent. Never, ever go into the attic. It was right above my bedroom, but I only caught a glimpse once when Grandpa went up there. It was dark and empty, or so I thought. One night when I was 13, I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a soft groan from above. It was faint, like bumping your foot on a chair. Then, a quiet cry, like a child's whimper. My heart raced. I told my grandparents the next morning, and they said it was just them bumping into things. I didn't fully believe it, so that night I stayed up, waiting. Around 1 a.m., I heard it again, a low, painful groan turning into a man's cry. Frozen with fear, I eventually got up and shone my phone light toward the attic door. I grabbed a chair to reach the attic pull-down ladder, careful not to make noise. As I climbed up, a terrible smell hit me, a mix of skunk and something harsh. Inside, I found dusty boxes and old family portraits, including one of my mom, pregnant with me, and my dad. Then, a desperate groan came from a corner. My light revealed 2 cages covered with cloth. When I pulled it off, my blood ran cold. 2 creatures with burned, blackened skin, glowing red eyes, and no faces stared back at me. They screamed and thrashed violently. My grandparents appeared and sprayed them with a calming spray, explaining in a shaky voice that these were my parents. They told me a story I could hardly believe. After my parents died, they made a deal with a mysterious man who promised to bring them back. At first, they seemed normal, but soon they turned aggressive, animalistic, and dangerous. My grandparents tried to contain them, trapping them in those cages for years. They warned me to never go near the attic because my parents-turned creatures might get hungry if they saw me. Suddenly, the cages broke. My grandparents told me to run while they held them off. I fled, heart pounding, escaping to the farmhouse nearby. I hid behind a haystack, covering myself in mud to mask my scent as the creatures sniffed around, then finally left. The next day, I found the house in ruins and, heartbreakingly, the remains of my grandparents upstairs. I called the police, telling them a wild animal was responsible, because who would believe the truth? I moved away afterward, but I still carry that night with me. Recently, hearing about a child's terrible fate in the woods made me realize I had to share this. A warning to listen to those who protect you. Curiosity can lead to danger beyond imagination. The world holds darkness, and sometimes the monsters are closer than you think. Please, trust your loved ones when they say stay away. Hey, I want to share something personal with you. Something that's haunted me for years. It's about the woods near where I grew up and the terrifying presence that lives there. I hope by telling you this, it'll serve as a warning, because what I experienced was very real and very dangerous. So, I'm Liam. When I was a kid, my dad left us, and my mom decided to leave the city behind to start fresh. We moved to this tiny cabin deep in the Wisconsin woods when I was about 10. At first, I really hated it. Those woods? They scared me to death. Every time I looked out the window, I'd get this chill, like something was watching me from the shadows between the trees. It wasn't just a feeling. It was this deep, bone-chilling presence that never left me, not even as I got older. Walking to school through those endless, towering trees was the worst. I'd sense eyes tracking me from above, and it made me feel small and vulnerable. Funny thing is, my mom felt the exact opposite. She loved the woods. She'd take long walks, paint the trees, and always told me she felt safe and protected there. I never understood that. To me, it was the opposite. The woods were a place of dread. One night, I saw something. A huge silhouette with long arms, hunched, staring right at me from the darkness. I froze, but when my mom came in, it vanished. I tried telling her, but she just brushed it off, saying the woods were our shield from the bad in the world. I wanted to believe her, but I knew what I saw. Then, one morning on the walk to school, I heard snapping branches behind me. I didn't dare look back at first, but when the sound came again, I bolted. Fast footsteps chased me, and I ran until I burst out of the woods, my heart pounding. I told my best friend Jake, who lived nearby and shared my fear. He even admitted he'd seen something too. We tried walking home slowly together, hoping that if we stayed calm, the thing wouldn't chase us. But the snapping sounds followed, closer and louder, until we sprinted to my cabin, locking the door behind us. That night, I looked out my window again and saw it closer. This grotesque creature with a hunched back, long clawed fingers, no eyes, but somehow its gaze locked onto me. It wasn't human. wasn't any animal I'd ever seen. It was a predator, and I was its prey. The next day, the worst happened. Jake disappeared. His parents found his room empty. I was terrified, convinced the creature had taken him. I begged my mom to believe me, but she just said he might have run away, not understanding the danger lurking just beyond our cabin. At school, everyone was buzzing with rumors. Some thought Jake ran off, others whispered darker things. I wanted to scream the truth, but no one would listen. I felt alone, scared, and desperate. That night, I made a plan. I packed a flashlight, extra batteries, water, and pepper spray my mom gave me, and waited until she went to bed. Then, I slipped out into the woods to find Jake. The forest was eerily silent. No crickets, no owls, just darkness. When my flashlight died, panic set in. I scrambled for batteries, and when I turned it back on, I saw it. The creature, right in front of me. Its skin was raw muscle, its mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, no eyes but a terrible grin. It grabbed me by the head and dragged me into a dark cave I'd never seen before. I was hung upside down, ropes binding my ankles. There, I saw Jake's orange shirt on the ground. The creature spoke in a deep, gruff voice, calling me food, telling me it had been watching me and that Jake had tasted wonderful. I asked what it was. It said it was an ancient being, almost extinct, ruling the woods for centuries, preying on anything that dared enter. It only hunted kids because they tasted the best. It had no eyes but tracked scent like a predator. Just as it was about to eat me, I managed to spray it with pepper spray. It shrieked and dropped me. I ran, heart pounding, until I burst out of the cave into the daylight. I ran straight home, where my mom was waiting, tears in her eyes. We moved away soon after, back to the city, to my aunt's place. Even now, I think about Jake and that creature. I tried telling my mom, but she never believed me. What terrifies me most is knowing there are still more of those things out there, lurking in the woods, waiting. So, please, if you're ever near a dark forest, especially at night, be careful. Listen to the silence. Watch the shadows. They're watching too, and they're hungry. Hey there. I want to share something that's been weighing on my heart for a long time. It's a story about how life can change in the blink of an eye, and how sometimes the things we love the most can turn into nightmares. So, I've been a drinker for as long as I can remember. It started back in high school when my buddy Marco handed me a beer at a party during freshman year. From that moment, I was hooked. I won't lie, it was rough. Flunked almost all my classes, barely scraped by graduation. My days were filled with parties and nights of drinking, thinking I was invincible, like nothing could touch me. After high school, I bounced around jobs, getting fired for showing up drunk or missing work because of hangovers. Eventually, I gave up trying to hold down a job and just holed up in my parents' basement, playing video games and drowning in beer. My parents were tough on me, saying things like, "Ethan, you're going to ruin yourself if you keep this up," or "Get your act together." I never listened. I felt hopeless, like I was stuck in a cycle I couldn't break. One day, while grabbing beer at the grocery store, I met someone who changed everything. I reached for a pack of Corona, and this woman, about my age, with long dark hair and bright green eyes, grabbed for the same pack. Her name was Candace. We started talking, and I learned she was going through her own struggles. A recent breakup, tough job as a waitress, just trying to get by. We clicked instantly. That night, we grabbed dinner and talked about everything from our messed up pasts to our hopes for the future. She gave me her number, telling me to call any time. Over the next months, we grew closer, dated, and eventually, I asked her to marry me. I bought her a gold ring with a sparkling diamond and surprised her by hiding it in the cake at dinner. Her face lit up with joy and tears. I'll never forget that moment. Candace became my rock. She helped me get a bartending job where she worked, and we supported each other to quit drinking. Life finally felt good, stable, hopeful. Then came the news that she was pregnant. We were over the moon, preparing a pink nursery for our baby girl, whom we planned to name Brielle. But as the due date neared, Candace got sick. Really sick. She was throwing up blood, passing out, and I was terrified. The day she went into labor, it was chaos. At the hospital, I waited, praying even though I'm not a religious man. Then a doctor came out and told me my worst nightmare. Candace didn't make it, and our baby was stillborn. I was shattered. The woman who saved me, who loved me, was gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I remember her last words to me before the hospital. "I love you." Those words echoed in my mind as I drove home, stopped at the store where we met, and bought pack after pack of beer. I drank like I never had before, trying to drown the pain. That night, after drinking until I passed out, I woke up to whispers calling my name. I found myself back at the hospital, alone in a dark hallway. Then I heard Candace's voice, telling me she was okay and to come see our child. I ran to a room where she held our baby, but the sight was horrifying. Our daughter was covered in blood, her eyes missing. Candace's face was grotesquely distorted, her skin rotten and eyes black. She begged me to hold our daughter, but I ran away, terrified. The creature that looked like Candace chased me, pleading for me to complete our family. I was trapped, desperate to escape. Then everything went dark. The voices kept calling my name, louder and louder, until silence. I woke up in an ambulance, paramedics working frantically to save me. One of them, a woman with dark hair, reminded me of Candace. I whispered to her, promising I was coming back, that I wouldn't leave her again. I survived, but I was broken. I was sent to rehab, and I still hear those whispers at night, see that horrifying creature in reflections. It's like the shadows of that night never left me. Now, there's another story I want to warn you about. The tale of a boy named Greg and a Thomas the Tank Engine episode called Sir Topham Hatt's Day Off. Greg loved Thomas, even when others mocked him. One day, he found an old VHS tape with that title. Despite warnings from his father, he watched it and saw something terrifying. The episode showed the beloved trains being shot by Sir Topham Hatt, who had bloodshot red eyes and a sinister smile. The images haunted Greg, giving him nightmares for years. His therapist tried to help, giving him a red stress ball to squeeze whenever the memories returned. Eventually, he even passed a test of recovery when handed a Thomas toy. But the horror didn't end. That same day, news broke of a 10-year-old girl found dead, with the same tape nearby. Greg's world shattered again, the terror of that cursed episode still very real. So, if you ever come across a Thomas the Tank Engine episode called Sir Topham Hatt's Day Off, please, don't watch it. Some things are better left forgotten. Thanks for listening. I hope sharing this helps someone out there feel less alone in their struggles. And remember, sometimes the darkest nights can lead to the brightest dawns, if you let them. Hey, I want to share something really personal with you. Something that's been with me for a long time now. I'm Henry, and my story starts way back in high school. I was just a regular kid, until I got my first taste of alcohol at a party, thanks to my buddy Mark. From that point on, drinking became my escape, my constant companion. I won't lie, it messed me up pretty bad. Sleepless nights, nightmares, flunked classes, you name it. Somehow, I barely graduated. After high school, life didn't get easier. I bounced from job to job, losing them because of my drinking. My parents? They were at their wits' end with me. They'd say things like, "Henry, if you keep this up, you're going to ruin your life." Or, "Get your act together and find a job." But I just shut them out. I felt hopeless, like I was stuck in a dark tunnel with no way out. Then, one day at the grocery store, of all places, I met Candace. I was reaching for a pack of beer, and she grabbed the same one. We started talking, and, honestly, I felt like I could breathe again. She was going through her own struggles. Recent breakup, tough job as a waitress, barely making rent. We connected over our shared pain, and slowly, things started to change. We went from strangers to friends, then to dating, and eventually, I asked her to marry me. I remember hiding the ring in the cake at our dinner, and when she found it, her tears and joy made me feel like I had a new purpose. Candace was my rock. She helped me get a bartending job, supported me when my parents distanced themselves, and together, we fought our addictions. Life was finally looking up. We had a home, steady jobs, and then came the best news. We were expecting a baby girl. We painted her nursery pink, got a cute crib, and named her Brianna, after one of Candace's favorite singers. But as the due date approached, things took a turn for the worse. Candace got really sick, throwing up blood, fainting. I was terrified for both of them. The delivery was a nightmare. Candace passed away during labor, and our baby girl was stillborn. I remember the doctor's words like a punch to the gut, and the world just shattered around me. I was broken, lost, drowning in grief. That night, I found myself back at the grocery store, buying pack after pack of beer. I hadn't touched alcohol in almost 2 years, but pain made me forget everything. I drank until I blacked out. Then, the strange things started. I woke up in a hospital hallway, empty and dimly lit. I heard Candace's voice, telling me she was okay and to come see our daughter. I followed it to a room where she held our baby, but the baby's eyes were missing, her body covered in blood. Candace looked horrifying, her face twisted and decayed. She urged me to hold our child, but I was terrified and ran away. As I fled, Candace's figure chased me, begging me not to leave them, calling me to complete our family. I was paralyzed with fear, trapped in this nightmare until everything went black. Then, I woke up in an ambulance, paramedics working frantically to save me. One of them even resembled Candace, which made everything feel surreal. I was lucky to be alive, but the damage was severe. My lungs were ruined, and I couldn't breathe or speak for weeks. Now, I'm in rehab, trying to piece my life back together. But those whispers, they never leave me. At night, I still hear my name being called softly, haunting me. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I feel like that creature is just behind me, waiting. It's a reminder of the darkness I've faced, but I'm holding on, telling myself I won't let it win. Hey, I want to share a story with you. Something that's been on my mind for a long time. It's about second chances, strange encounters, and a son unlike any other. I'm not one for drama, just a regular guy named Dave. I'm in my mid-30s, working construction, married to my wife Barbara, and we've had our struggles, especially when it came to having a child. Barbara and I wanted a baby so badly, but it just never happened. Watching friends start families while we faced disappointment was tough. Barbara held on to hope longer than I did, but after a while, we decided to try adoption. On the way to the adoption center, Barbara was quiet, tears quietly falling. Then, at the clinic, we met a man named Kyle. He called himself Lazarus. Tall, with striking green eyes, he seemed to know more about us than he should. He told us he was a servant of a higher power. Not the God we knew, but someone else. He offered to help us have a child of our own, and despite my doubts, Barbara accepted a strange purple potion from him. She drank it, collapsed, but after some rest, the doctors confirmed she was pregnant. It was a miracle, but one wrapped in mystery. When our son was born, Lazarus showed up again, handing us a list of rules we had to follow. Rules that seemed bizarre and frightening. Calling our son only by the name Lazarus, never looking at him while he ate, keeping him isolated from other kids, making sure he was in bed by 10 p.m., and some even darker, like keeping him chained outside on his 15th birthday. We followed the rules out of fear and hope, but as Lazarus grew, he changed. His mood darkened, he screamed at night, and one time Barbara saw his eyes glow yellow. The things we feared seemed real. On his 15th birthday, we chained him in the shed like the rules said, but the chain broke. That night, a creature, not quite our son, prowled the house, growling and searching. We hid, terrified, as the creature's glowing yellow eyes searched for us. The house was wrecked by morning, and Lazarus was gone. Then the man, Lazarus, returned, warning us that by breaking the rules, we unleashed a monster. We knew what had to be done, but it broke our hearts. One night, when Lazarus came back, he seemed normal at first, but his eyes betrayed him, glowing yellow. Before we could react, he attacked Barbara. I barely escaped to the shed, locking the door behind me as the creature tried to break in. I held my shotgun, tears streaming down, knowing the fight ahead was terrifying. This story isn't just about horror or monsters. It's about choices, consequences, and the things we do for those we love. I wish I could say it ended differently, but sometimes the price of a miracle is higher than we expect. Thanks for listening to my story. Hey, I want to share with you a story that's honestly changed how I see things forever. It all started when I was 16, just a regular high school girl named Emma. I wasn't really into all that internet mystery stuff, especially the dark web. Honestly, I had way better things to do, like hanging out with my friends or getting my nails done. But one day at school, my friend Kelly told me about her boyfriend getting dared to go on the dark web. She said, "There's some really creepy stuff there. Videos of cults, sacrifices, super disturbing." And I was like, why would anyone want to see that? Gross. Kelly agreed, and we didn't think much more of it. Except at lunch, everyone was buzzing about Robbie's dare and how maybe one of us should try it. I stayed quiet, not wanting any part of it. I knew the dark web had awful stuff, violent things, illegal things, and I was not about that life. Then my other friend, Christine, jokingly said, "Hey, maybe Emma should do it." I immediately said no. But then my friends started chanting, "Do it, do it, do it." I was so embarrassed, but eventually I just gave in and shouted, "Fine, I'll do it." They cheered, and Kelly said, "Okay, but you have to FaceTime me while you're on, and Robbie will send you a link." I was mad, but whatever. I figured I'd just glance and get it over with. That night, Robbie texted me a link and said, "Good luck." I got goosebumps, but I wasn't about to chicken out. I FaceTimed Kelly as I opened the link, grumbling, "This is so stupid. Can't believe I'm doing this." She laughed and said, "You just have to click on one site, then we'll all have a good laugh." The page loaded, a black screen with a skull and a bunch of red links. I clicked on the third link and found an auction site. At first, it didn't seem too bad, but then I saw female names with links. I clicked a random one and saw a blurry photo of a girl walking home from school. She looked about my age, brown hair, green eyes. The description said, Tiffany, 16, high school, Riverside. Parents, Helen and Mark. Hair, brown. Eyes, green. Body, petite. And then a price, $20,000. My heart dropped. What is this? I whispered to Kelly. It's like they're selling girls, I said, voice shaking. Kelly freaked and told me to call the police. I was about to hang up to dial 911 when I saw a name at the top of the list, Emma Morgan. My breath caught. I clicked on it, and there I was, a photo of me walking home. The description was detailed and creepy, like they knew everything. My age, my school, my parents, even my body. The price was $60,000. I screamed, tears streaming. I couldn't hear Kelly anymore. I hung up and ran to my parents' room. They came running out when they heard me crying. I told them everything. They checked the website, called the police, but the site was untraceable. They promised to have an officer nearby just in case. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that auction haunted me. How did they know all that? Were they watching me? The next day, my friends apologized and suggested we go shopping to take my mind off it. I agreed, but when I asked Kelly to walk home with me, she said her mom was picking her up. My parents were stuck at work, so I had to walk home alone. I told myself, it's just 15 minutes, it's afternoon, people are around. But then, I noticed a man behind me, walking fast. I sped up, but he matched my pace. Panic set in, and I ran. Just as I reached my door, fumbling for keys, I felt a sharp prick in my shoulder, and everything went black. When I woke, I was in a dark room, chained to the floor, a computer glowing in front of me. On the screen, a Google Meet with 50 people watching. I screamed, begged for help. Then, a man stepped out of the shadows. Black jeans, black hoodie, face hidden. He asked, "How much?" The crowd started shouting prices. 60,000, 80,000, 90,000. Then, 115,000. The man said, "Going once, going twice, sold." 2 days later, Kelly was holding a missing person poster, my poster. Tears in her eyes, she looked at my smiling photo, blonde hair shining, brown eyes sparkling. "Emma, I'm so sorry," she whispered. And that's how a stupid dare on the dark web changed my life forever. Hey, I want to share something that's been on my mind for a while. So, I've been seeing my girlfriend Jame for about 2 months, and I've been over at her place quite a bit. But there was this one night that just felt different. You know how it is when you're a teenager. Anything to spend time with your girl, especially when her parents aren't around. But at Jame's house, nighttime was always a little weird. Like there was this vibe that something wasn't quite right. What really got to me was going upstairs to the bathroom at night. Every time, it felt like someone was watching me, or maybe just following me closely. It was unsettling. Jame's mom was cool with me being there late, and when I knocked, she just let me in with that knowing smile and a wink. She told me she was heading out to dinner with her fiancé, and that I had the run of the house until Jame got back. She joked, "Just don't steal anything," and then left. I settled in the living room, streaming some Seinfeld to keep my mind off things. But when nature called, I had to face those stairs. The dark stairwell freaked me out. I asked Jame once why the lights in the entryway and stairs never worked for long. She said they'd only stay on for a day or so, and no one knew why. That just made me even more uneasy. So I bolted up the stairs, did my business, and was about to head back down when I heard it. Her dog, Max, was growling at something down the hall. But it didn't sound like Max. He's a tiny Pomeranian. No, this was a deep, angry growl, like a Rottweiler or something way bigger. I shouted, "Max, it's just me!" and nearly tripped going down the steps. Max usually sleeps upstairs at this hour, so this growling was off. Then I heard the car door slam outside. Jame was home. I never told her how freaked out I was by the house, but that night I rented the movie Sinister just to match the spooky mood. I was waiting for her to come in before pressing play. She walked in, the back of her facing me as she shut the door, and I was about to say, "Babe, your dog is acting really weird." But then she turned around, and I froze. The hair on my arm stood up. She was holding Max. She said she'd taken him to her cousin's place to play with the kids. I stammered, "Oh, I didn't realize Max was with you." She smiled and asked, "So what was it you wanted to say about him?" I just told her it was nothing and suggested we watch TV. After that, I avoided those stares completely. But even then, I kept catching shadows moving out of the corner of my eye near the front door. Every time I looked, it stopped. Since then, Jame started coming over to my place more often. At first, I asked her to, but eventually, it was her idea. Max passed away peacefully in his sleep at 13 years old, and since that day, Jame's told me something that still sends chills down my spine. She said, "Ever since I was little, I thought it was Max growling outside the bathroom at night. But now that he's gone, the growling hasn't stopped. It's coming from my closet." Hey, I want to tell you about this really weird experience I had one night. It was around 2 a.m. and I was just chilling on the couch, flipping through channels to unwind. I landed on the tail end of a sitcom, kind of like a classic family comedy, and then the screen went black for a second before switching to Seinfeld. You know, that's actually my all-time favorite show. But this episode, something was seriously off. Usually, Seinfeld kicks off with Jerry doing his stand-up routine, right? But this time, Jerry was at the mic looking completely out of it. He looked pale, his words were slurred, and he kept nodding off. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed the mic stand to steady himself and collapsed. There was blood coming from his nose, like a lot, but his eyes stayed shut. It was chilling. Then, a crew member hurried on stage, helped him up, and they took him off, with Jerry clutching his stomach like he was about to throw up. After that, the actual episode started, and I realized I had never seen this one before. I mean, I've watched every episode multiple times over the years, and Jerry never got taken off stage like that. I just kept thinking, why would they leave that in? What is going on here? The scene shifted to Jerry standing in his kitchen, but it wasn't the usual clean, familiar kitchen from the show. This was some dingy, run-down place, walls stained, dishes piled up everywhere, just a mess. Jerry looked awful. 2 black eyes, mouth hanging open, drool pooling on the floor, barely conscious. Then the buzzer rang, and without hesitation, he let whoever it was in. It was Elaine. But this wasn't the Elaine we know. She looked worse than Jerry. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her skin pale and gaunt, her face scarred with smudged makeup, hair wild and tangled. She came in and kept shaking Jerry, saying over and over, "Jer, wake up, wake up." But Jerry just kept mumbling, what?" and wiping his face, barely responding. I won't lie, it was haunting. This version of the show was like a twisted nightmare of the characters we thought we knew. It felt so real, but at the same time, completely surreal. It stuck with me ever since, and honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. Just thought I'd share this strange little piece of my night with you. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me recently. something that's been on my mind a lot. So I was walking back from my new friend Haley's house late at night. Where I live now, it's pretty rural. Just 2 of the 5 families around here, including mine and Haley's, and our parents own a lot of land with gas wells scattered about. It's peaceful, and honestly, it feels good to walk alone at night without that constant worry I had back in the city. Anyway, I was making my way down this trail that only folks around here really know about, kind of carved out by us over time. Suddenly, I hear these crunching sounds, like someone running through the branches. It startled me, but I thought maybe it was my brother. He's older, and he and his friends love to scare me like that. They used to do it all the time when we lived in Chicago, so I figured it was just them messing around. But then I called my dad, and it was about 1:45 in the morning. He was pretty mad at first, probably because I was out so late. But then he told me my brother was actually in bed. He asked me exactly where I was. I told him I was coming back from Haley's place, and that's when he got really worried. He told me to run home as fast as I could. Turns out, he had just gotten a call from Haley's mom. Haley was missing, and so was her dad's pickaxe, the one I had actually seen leaning against their house when I left. Dad said Haley was a very sick girl, and kept telling me to hurry. He sounded scared. If he had known I was at her house, he would have come to get me right away. Now, thinking back, I remember when I was at Haley's, sitting in the bathroom, and she suddenly snuck in and hid in the bathtub behind the curtain. But she didn't jump out or scare me. Instead, she crawled after me to her room with this serious look on her face, not like she was joking. Then she suddenly went back to being her normal, fun self, and everything seemed fine. So, I ran through the woods, dropping my purse as I went. My legs were burning, and I was scared out of my mind. I almost ran right into my dad, who was just beyond the backyard with a flashlight. He told me to run inside. I waited in the living room, biting my nails like crazy, until he came in and started locking all the doors. He told me we'd be okay, and I finally went to bed. But just about half an hour ago, I woke up to a strange noise outside my bedroom window. It was 3:13 a.m., and I was terrified to look. I imagined the worst, maybe seeing Haley's face out there. When I finally pulled back the curtain, there was nothing. Until I turned on my phone's flashlight. And then, right there on the window, written in dew formed by fingerprints, was a word, but it was spelled backwards. It said T-S-O-M-L-A. Flipping it around, it reads, almost. I don't know what it means. I just wish I hadn't become her friend. Hey, I want to share a story that's been in my mind for a while now. After my grandma passed away, I started spending weekends at my grandpa's new apartment to keep him company and help him through the loneliness. I usually crashed on the pull-out bed that folds out from the living room couch. One night, after turning off the TV, I was just about drifting off. There was this old wooden clock on the mantel, and the steady ticking always helped me relax and fall asleep. But that night was different. As I was dozing, I heard this noise coming from the kitchen, this shuffling sound. It immediately took me back to childhood memories, because I had a cousin who used to sleepwalk when she visited. I remember one night finding her standing in the bathroom closet, and ever since, that image has haunted me in nightmares. So hearing those footsteps stop once they reached the dining room carpet really freaked me out. I froze, gripping the covers so tight my palms felt sweaty. Then the footsteps stopped, but something even more unsettling started. The sound of something gliding across the carpet. It was like movers dragging a heavy piece of furniture through the living room. My heart was pounding, and I pulled the pillow over my ears, but I could still hear it. Then, right where my feet were at the end of the couch, the bed slumped down as if someone sat there, pressing down on the covers wrapped around my legs. I tried to kick and squirm free, but nothing budged. In desperation, I called out, "Grandma, I know you're here, but please leave me alone." Instead of stopping, it felt like whoever it was climbed up onto the couch, like they were about to straddle me. That's when I finally threw myself off and ran down the hallway, flipping on every light. But when I looked around, there was no one there. I left everything as it was, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed with my grandpa. He never even woke up. That night, I had the most terrifying nightmares. At one point, I woke up soaked in sweat from dreaming I was eating mealworms and maggots out of a bag of chips. I could taste it so vividly, but I was too scared to get up and rinse my mouth out. The next morning, Grandpa asked why I was in his bed. I told him everything. The noises, the feeling, the presence. He just looked down quietly. I suggested maybe it was Grandma checking on me, and that I might have been imagining things. But he shook his head firmly. He said, "Grandma passed away at Riverside Hospital," and my heart skipped a beat. So it couldn't have been her. I didn't ask you or your brother to stay here because I'm lonely or sad. I asked you to come because of that. I pressed him. Are you sure it wasn't Grandma? And his answer still chills me. No, it wasn't. Whatever it is, it hates me and wants me gone. Grandpa passed away about a year later. My mom brought him to live with us after that strange experience. As he settled in, his mind started slipping because of Alzheimer's, and at night he would wander the halls. Sometimes I'd hear that same shuffling sound. Other times, a gliding noise I never dared to investigate. During those nights, I often found our dog hiding under my bed. I wondered if whatever was there had followed Grandpa home, and even worse, if it took him when he died. I don't think it was human, and honestly, I'm still not sure what to make of it. Hey, I want to share a story from my old neighborhood about this street called Pinewood Drive. It intersected with my street just a few blocks away, and there was this eerie local legend everyone whispered about. Back in the early 80s, a 16-year-old girl named Selena was walking home from school during a storm when a drunk driver hit her. The accident was so severe that she died instantly. What made it even more heartbreaking was that she had just found out she was pregnant a week before. Some folks in town believed she was actually coming back from a clinic after an abortion, and that somehow that was the reason this tragedy struck her. The story goes that her spirit wanders the neighborhood, but only when it rains, because she died in a storm. Now, I know stories like these sound like ghost tales, but growing up, my friends and I were obsessed with trying to find Selena's ghost. Once I got my driver's license, we'd drive around Pinewood Drive, usually after a few drinks, hoping to catch a glimpse. One night, just as a light drizzle started, we spotted a girl in a bright red coat walking by the side of the road. No umbrella, which was a classic sign of Selena's trick. She'd make drivers stop to help her get out of the rain. We slowed down, even though Jeff and I were uneasy about it. Our friend Kyle sighed, it's just Jenny." We rolled down the window and called out, "Jenny Vanelli, need a ride?" To our relief, she smiled and said, "Yes, please." I moved over so she could hop in next to me, and after she thanked us, we started chatting about the ghost story, half joking about how ridiculous it all sounded. Then the rain started pouring hard. Jenny, who was usually super chatty, suddenly went quiet. That silence was so unlike her. You might think, oh no, you picked up the ghost instead of Jenny. But no, I looked right at her. Definitely Jenny. After a moment, she looked up and asked, "Do you know how Selena tricks people into giving her a ride?" Jeff nodded and said, "Yeah, she walks without an umbrella, and people feel sorry and stop for her." Then Jenny added, "Do you know the other way?" We waited. Her voice dropped into this eerie, shrill whisper. "She tricks them by looking like someone they know." Right then, the car screeched to a halt. I caught a glimpse of terror in Kyle's eyes through the rearview mirror, and Jenny's face, Her mouth twisted into this evil cackle, revealing missing teeth and blood trickling down. For a second, I saw a horrifying, disfigured face staring right at me. We all jumped out screaming. Kyle's car ended up being towed. The next day at school, Jenny told us she'd been home all night. It's been over 2 decades now, but I still get uneasy when it rains. Oh, and when Kyle finally got his car back from impound, there was a pacifier sitting right there in the back seat. I've carried 2 memories for years, and even now, I still don't know what to do with them. I've tried telling myself it was stress, fear, sickness, or my mind filling in the blanks. But the truth is, I know what I saw. And some nights, when the dreams come back, it feels like those moments are still sitting beside me, waiting to be understood. The first thing happened a few years before 2021. I grew up in a planned industrial town, the kind of place built decades ago with help from the Soviet Union. A lot of the homes had been there since the late 1960s, and families still lived in them because the company controlled most of the city. My father worked there, so we had access to places most people didn't, or at least he knew about them. Near the old post office, there was this narrow road people sometimes talked about like it was a shortcut. But it was always guarded. No one was supposed to go in. When I asked my father about it, he said there was no such road, no hidden section, nothing like that. But one summer afternoon, around noon, I accidentally ended up there. It was blazing hot outside, the kind of heat that makes the air look bent. I was on my scooter, expecting the road to curve back toward the main street, but it didn't. It just kept going. The farther I went, the quieter everything became. The town behind me seemed to fade out, and suddenly I was in a place that felt completely wrong. There were broken signs, dry leaves everywhere, and an old board that looked like it once pointed towards some kind of library. That made no sense, because there was no ancient library anywhere in our city. I had checked records before. I knew the place I lived in. Then I saw a ruined house in the distance. It didn't look like the other houses around us. It had that older Russian style, heavy and strange, almost like it belonged to a different century. There was also a pond, cracked statues, and one statue that looked like a mother holding a child. Everything felt abandoned, but not empty. I remember wanting to leave immediately. I was scared in a way I couldn't explain. I kept driving, praying under my breath, trying to find an exit. Then I looked in my right mirror. There was a woman behind me, dressed in white, with something covering her head. For a second, I thought maybe she was just another person taking the same shortcut. I even thought about stopping to ask her how to get out. But then, she was gone. Not walking away, not turning a corner, just gone. Somehow, a road opened ahead, and I found my way out. I went home shaken and told my parents. They warned me not to take strange routes, but the part that still bothers me is this. When I went back later with friends, nothing was there. No ruined house, no pond, no statue, no old library sign. Nothing. It was like the road had swallowed itself. The second memory happened in 2021, when I was 16 and sick with COVID. My mother and I were both in the hospital. I was on oxygen, and she was in serious condition. At first, I was in a general ward before they moved me to a private room, and that day was one of the worst days I can remember. 7 people died in that ward, one after another, every few hours. There were nurses, machines, panic, prayers, and that heavy silence that falls after someone is gone. But what I remember most clearly is the bird. I know how that sounds. I know people will say I was sick, exhausted, scared, maybe hallucinating. But the room was sealed. The windows weren't open. The air conditioning was running. There was no way a bird should have been inside, and no one else seemed to see it. It moved from bed to bed. Each time it stepped away from someone, that person died soon after. I watched it happen again and again. At one point, it circled my mother's bed, and I remember praying with everything I had that it wouldn't stop there. It didn't. It moved to another bed. That was the 7th one. After the 7th death, the bird disappeared. During that time, I kept having the same dream. I was in a white place where trains came and went. People got off. People got on. Some left and never came back. I kept trying to climb onto one of the trains, but someone always stopped me. Then I saw my grandfather board one. That night, I thought it was just another nightmare. The next morning, our relatives told us he had passed away while we were in the hospital. Later, my mother said she had dreamed of him too. In her dream, he told her he would take her place because he was old, and her children still needed her. She forgot many things from that year, and honestly, so did I. 2021 feels blurred at the edges, but that part stayed. My mother survived, even though she had been critically ill, and sometimes, I wonder if my grandfather gave something up for her. I don't know what these two incidents were. I don't know if they were connected. Maybe they were trauma. Maybe they were warnings. Maybe there are places and moments where the world opens a door it usually keeps locked. But I know this much. I didn't make it up. And even after all these years, I still find myself asking the same question. What did I see? I'm 16 now, but this happened when I was 14. Back then, I was kind of a difficult kid. I was always breaking school rules, skipping classes, smoking way too much weed, and using nicotine pouches all the time. I was basically high from morning to night most days. At home, my dad had a few simple rules for me, like don't stay out too late, help keep the place clean, stuff like that. Nothing extreme. I think he just wanted some kind of peace in the house, especially because there was already enough tension over how I acted at school and outside of home. Anyway, one day felt completely normal. I went to school, hung out with my friends, smoked, and then came home in the evening. I ate something, went to my room, played games for a while, and got ready to sleep. But that night felt different from the start. I'm telling this the best I can from memory because it's been a while, but I never really forgot it. I just couldn't make sense of it. When I laid down, I couldn't fall asleep. I kept turning over, changing positions, trying to get comfortable, but something felt off. I still can't explain it properly. It wasn't just that I wasn't tired. It was more like I was in this strange, foggy state where everything felt slightly unreal. At the time, I had a can of nicotine pouches hidden under my pillow. I kept it there because my dad had a habit of poking around my room when he came in to wake me up, and I didn't want him finding it. So while I was lying there tossing around, I slipped my hand under the pillow and felt the can. But the weird part is, it felt like it was moving away from me. Not rolling, not slipping by itself naturally, but almost like it was being pushed just out of reach. I remember thinking, what the hell? I kept trying to reach it with my fingers. I could feel the edge of it, then it would slide farther away. I'd reach again, and it would move again, toward the side of the bed. Then suddenly, it was just gone. I couldn't feel it anymore. I figured maybe it had fallen off onto the floor or landed on a bag or something, because I never heard it hit the ground. But I was so out of it by then that I didn't even get up to check. I just wanted the whole feeling to stop so I could sleep. Then, for some reason, I sat up. I don't even know why. Maybe I was trying to catch my breath or switch positions again. But when I looked toward the end of my bed, I saw something I still can't explain. There was a figure standing there. It looked like a girl, or a woman, but not clearly. The room was dark, but my eyes had adjusted after lying there so long. I could make out this dark, bluish shape at the foot of the bed. It didn't have a face, not really, not one I could actually see. But somehow I felt, deep down, that it was female. And this is the part that still embarrasses me a little. For 1 second, in that half-awake, confused state, I thought it might be my ex, or maybe just some version of her, because I missed her a lot back then. That's honestly what it felt like. I even reached my hand out toward it. Then something in me snapped back. It was like my brain suddenly woke up and realized, no, this is wrong. I dropped back onto the bed, pulled the blanket over my head, and just stayed there. My heart was pounding, but even then I still felt trapped in that same weird, hazy state. At some point, I finally fell asleep. The next day, I completely forgot about it. I went through school like normal. But later on, after I got home, I suddenly thought, wait, where did my nicotine pouch can go? And the second I thought that, the whole night came rushing back. It was just gone. So, I need to tell you about something that happened to me the other night, because I still can't quite shake it. I was asleep, definitely dreaming, but at the same time I felt strangely awake, like I knew exactly where I was and what was around me. I've had plenty of weird dreams before, but nothing has ever felt this real. It was different in a way that stayed with me. For a little background, I live with my mom, dad, and my younger brother in a small, single-story house, and we all sleep in separate rooms. I've also had some health issues over the past couple of years, and they've made sleeping properly a lot harder than it used to be. Anyway, in the middle of the night, I suddenly felt deeply unsettled. It was like there was someone lying beside me on the far side of the bed, just behind my back. I could feel the slightest touch in my hair, then on my shoulder. And even though I couldn't physically turn or move, I could see this man clearly in my mind, almost like I was looking at him through a dream. His name, somehow, felt like Adrian, or maybe that's just the name my mind gave him afterward. He was holding a knife, which should have terrified me, but oddly enough, it didn't. Once I saw his face, there was something calm about him. I still don't understand that part. Then it changed. I felt myself being pulled out of bed, slowly and gently, like something was dragging me by inches. Not my body exactly, more like some other part of me. It felt as though I was being moved around the edge of the bed and brought back to the place where I was actually lying. I still couldn't move a single muscle. It honestly felt like my spirit had been tugged away from me and was trying to find its way back. Then it happened again, only this time I was pulled around a corner I didn't recognize and down this long, sloping passage that seemed to go on forever. That was the moment the fear really hit. I looked up and saw this pale figure rushing toward me, almost like one of those old-fashioned sheet ghosts from a cartoon, except there was nothing funny about it at all. Pure panic kicked in. It was that raw fight-or-flight feeling, and somehow I chose to fight. I forced myself free from whatever was dragging me and ran straight at the figure, like I needed to drive it away before it reached me. And then, all at once, I was back. I felt myself slam back into where I should have been, right there in bed. I woke with a scream, hands clenched so tightly they ached, then finally let go. I gasped for breath, reached over, and switched on the lamp. When I checked my phone, it was 3:48 a.m. I've been thinking about it ever since, because it unsettled me in a way ordinary dreams never do. I've had vivid nightmares before, strange ones too, but this felt physical. Ever since I was little, my grandparents' house has never felt quite right to me. I'm sharing this because I honestly wonder whether anyone else has lived through something like this or has any sense of what it could mean. The house was built in the late 1970s in Arizona, and it always seemed divided into two completely different worlds. The front part felt normal enough. That's where the living room, kitchen, and main bedroom were, and nothing ever really happened there. But the back half of the house had a completely different feeling. That's where the den was, with windows looking out into the backyard, along with my childhood bedroom, the bathroom, and my sister Mara's room. That whole section always felt heavy, like the air shifted the minute you stepped into it. One of my earliest memories happened when I was about 4 years old. I was sleeping in one of the back bedrooms, the room that later became Mara's. I remember lying in bed and seeing this figure crawl out of the wall right above me. It looked like a cowboy, but not like anything real. He was glowing this strange neon green, and he had this huge smile stretched from ear to ear. I ran out of the room terrified, and when someone came back in with me, he was gone. After that, I refused to sleep there and switched rooms. Years later, when I was in middle school, my grandparents and I moved to a different house for about a year, while my mom stayed behind at the original one. She told us that while she was there alone, her exercise ball would randomly roll through the back part of the house by itself. Not wobble, not shift a little, actually roll around. When we eventually moved back in, things picked right back up. One day, my mom, Mara, and I were arguing near the bathroom, and right in the middle of it, the shower curtain rod suddenly flew across the room. There wasn't any reason for it. It just launched. For as long as I can remember, I also hated looking toward the backyard through the sliding glass door in the den. I always had this strong feeling that something was watching me from outside, just beyond the glass. It didn't matter if it was daytime or night. That feeling never left. In 8th grade, I was lying in bed watching videos on my phone when I suddenly heard a growl right beside my ear. At the same time, I felt breath there too, like something was leaning over me. I froze. The next year, I started waking up in the middle of the night because all the lights in my room would switch on by themselves. Then, once I was awake, they'd flicker. In 10th grade, I had a friend sleep over. She tried to stay in my room, but after a while she told me she couldn't do it because she kept hearing whispering. So we moved into the den instead. We were sitting there together when we watched one of the deck chairs outside slowly turn by itself until it was facing us. We both saw it happen. Later in high school, Mara came into my room in the middle of the night completely panicked. She has never believed in anything paranormal, ever. So seeing her that shaken really stuck with me. She said she'd gone to the kitchen for a snack, and on the way back down the hall, she felt someone run up right behind her. She spun around expecting to see a person, but nobody was there. A few months later, I was back at my grandparents' house for Christmas, and someone had given me ghost hunting equipment as a joke gift. My husband, my mom, and I decided to try it in my old bedroom just for fun. But it stopped feeling fun pretty quickly. The spirit box said my name, then my husband's, then my mom's, and then my grandparents' names. The voice kept shifting back and forth between sounding male and female. We were also recording audio, and later, when we listened back, we caught a woman's voice saying, "Shh, Elena's back." Then a few years after that, I came by for a visit with my 2-year-old son. He wandered toward the back rooms and then suddenly came running out, shaking, hiding behind me, and pointing toward the old bedrooms. I had never seen him scared like that before. So that's my story. I still don't know what to make of any of it. Maybe there's an explanation for some of these things. Maybe not. But whatever was in that back part of the house felt consistent, almost familiar in the worst possible way, like it had been there the whole time, watching and waiting. And honestly, the smile is the part I've never been able to forget. I should probably start by saying I live with my grandmother. and our place is in a trailer park tucked back near the woods, not far from a few old abandoned mine entrances. I remember seeing old maps once that showed a mine running somewhere underneath this area, and I've heard bits and pieces over the years about accidents and people dying down there. So even without everything else, it already has that kind of feeling to it. Our trailer is small and simple. Just one floor, no attic, no basement, nowhere for anybody to really hide. The kitchen opens right into the living room. My grandmother's bedroom is off the living room, and the only hallway leads to my room. We've always kept the windows shut, the doors locked up tight, and for a long time, we even had an alarm system. So when strange things started happening, that was part of what made it worse. There was never any good explanation for how someone could have gotten in. The first thing I really remember happened early one morning, around 5:30. It was still dark enough that everything in the living room looked washed in shadow. I was sitting there reading, with my cat curled up in my lap, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this dark shape peeking from behind a recliner, like it was watching me. The second both my cat and I looked toward it, it pulled back out of sight. That alone was enough to make my stomach drop, but it kept happening. For well over an hour, maybe closer to 2, I'd catch that same shape leaning out just enough to watch me, and every single time I looked straight at it, it would duck back like it didn't want to be seen. What made it worse was that I couldn't just head back to my room, because the shadow was coming from that direction. So I stayed there, frozen, pretending to read while trying not to panic. Then the next day, I was in the bathroom and heard something shift nearby, like something had moved when it shouldn't have. Another time, I heard footsteps come right up to my bedroom door. Not soft footsteps either, heavy ones, like somebody in work boots crossing the floor and stopping right outside. I just sat there, listening, waiting for them to move again, but I never heard them walk away. And the motion light by the door never came on. My grandmother doesn't walk around in boots, and I'm pretty sure she wasn't even awake yet. There was also a night, around 2 in the morning, when I heard footsteps moving in circles through the living room. I was sleeping in my grandmother's room that night, and I could see her from where I was lying. She was right there, only a few feet away, so I knew it wasn't her. Then I started seeing the shadow in my room too. The first time, it was in the corner. Same exact thing as before. I noticed it, and it pulled back the moment I looked directly at it. After that, I actually tested it. I started looking around my room casually, like I wasn't focused on anything, just to see whether it would show itself again. And it did. This time, it appeared near the foot of my bed, and again, the second I turned my attention toward it, it ducked away, like it knew I'd caught it. But the strangest thing I ever saw was another shape up near the ceiling in the corner of my room. It didn't even look like a full person. It looked more like a head, and what really stuck with me was that it seemed to have these horn-like shapes coming off it, maybe 5 or 6 of them. That image has never really left me. The truth is, I've had this feeling of being watched for as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, maybe 7 or 8, I used to feel like something was paying attention to me when nobody was there. I vaguely remember hearing a voice from under my bed when I was really little, maybe 4, though I've always tried to brush that one off because I was so young. Still, over the years there's been tapping on the walls at night, a single knock on my door when nobody was there, and no motion light turning on. I once heard this loud slamming noise, like a car door being slammed shut, moving up and down the street, and somehow, nobody else heard a thing. Then, just recently, my grandmother said she thought she heard my bedroom door slam around 1:30 in the morning. But I was awake at the time, nowhere near the door, and I didn't hear anything at all. Even the animals we've had seem to notice something. Every cat and dog that's lived with us has had this habit of staring into empty corners for no reason. One of our dogs used to bark at the corners too, like there was someone standing there that only he could see. I don't know exactly what's in that place with us, or if there's any explanation that would ever make sense. I just know it never felt empty. Not really. Let me tell you this the way it happened, because even now, saying it out loud feels strange. I'm not someone who's easily swept up by paranormal stories. I'm educated, I run a successful business, and I've always been the kind of person who picks things apart. I love magic, I love systems, and I love finding the mechanism behind something that first looks impossible. A lot of people want mystery. I usually want the wiring behind the wall. I'm an Occam's razor person. I've always admired characters like Sherlock Holmes, people who stare down the unbelievable and say, "Let's slow down and look at the evidence." That's how I live. So when I tell you I had an experience I can't neatly explain, I need you to understand that I did not arrive at that conclusion lightly. My wife and I went to Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Las Vegas on Friday, February 20th, 2026. We were in town for her birthday, and she'd wanted to visit for a long time. We both enjoy strange places, horror history, odd collections, all of that. We'd been to spots like the Museum of Death before, so I figured this would be intense, theatrical, maybe a little creepy, but still basically a curated experience. Something atmospheric, something fun. We timed the trip around a wedding weekend with friends, so it all lined up perfectly. Vegas, birthday, dark little adventure. Good excuse to get away. That was the plan. The first visit was during the day. We were excited, laughing, ready to be spooked in a safe, entertaining way. There were 4 of us total, us and another couple. The first thing that stood out happened in the serial killer room. After a few minutes, this rotten egg smell rolled in and completely filled the space. Not faint, not questionable. It was immediate and awful. The woman in the other couple finally said to the tour guide that it was too much and she couldn't keep going. Of course, my first thought was the most ordinary one possible. I assumed somebody had passed gas and nobody wanted to admit it. It was a long tour. People get uncomfortable. It happens. I even asked directly whether the smell was part of the museum's effects, and the guide said no. Now, did I think that was supernatural? No, not at all. Honestly, I can think of plenty of ways something like that could be staged. But I'm telling you because later, it started to feel less isolated, less easy to shrug off. Then came the basement hallway. We were gathered near the entrance, getting ready to go down into the basement, the area where rituals had supposedly taken place, where the pentagram remains. And standing there, I was suddenly hit with this wave of sadness so strong it felt borrowed, like it hadn't originated in me at all. I almost cried. That may not sound dramatic to some people, but if you know me, you'd know that kind of emotional surge is not typical for me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't primed to have a meltdown. I was still very much in observer mode. But I also know enough about the mind and body to admit that human beings are suggestible. Atmosphere matters. Sound matters. Frequencies matter. We can be affected by things we don't consciously register. So after the first visit, I didn't come away convinced of anything paranormal. But I did come away hooked. I needed to go back. Not because I wanted to expose the place. Honestly, even if every single thing in that museum was accomplished through design and illusion, I'd still love it. But for my own peace of mind, I needed to test it again. I needed another pass at the problem. This second visit was where things got harder for me to dismiss. At one point, my wife felt drawn to the Dr. Kevorkian room. She was using a spirit box, an ovulus, and an EMF detector. After a minute, I stepped out and left her alone in there so she could try without me influencing anything. The ovulus produced a few words, Miss. Alone. Gale. Legs. At the time, we didn't attach much meaning to it. Alone made sense because she was alone in the room. The rest felt random. But after we got home, we watched a Ghost Adventures quarantine episode and learned that in that same room, they had also gotten the name Gale in connection with one of Kevorkian's assisted deaths. That shook us. Not because it was proof, but because it landed like a delayed echo. We hadn't known that name at the time. Then I went back into the serial killer room, and this is where I started pushing. I had a spirit box, an EMF detector, and a REM pod. The REM pod was set near Charles Manson's ashes and bone fragments. I started antagonizing, pretty hard actually. I said things like, "Remember me from yesterday? Was that you with the smell? Show me something. I thought there was power in here. You can't even turn this light on. Come over here and prove it." The second I said that, the REM pod lit up. At almost the same moment, the spirit box gave me one clear word. Prove. That got my attention. But even then, I was trying to stay grounded. And then, off to my right, I saw what looked like a thick gray mist move through the room. I said out loud, right then, that it had to be dust. That was my immediate explanation, and I meant it. Later, back home, we were watching footage from the museum again, and I saw an anomaly captured in that same room, in nearly the same area, moving in the same way I remembered seeing it. That was one of the first moments I truly felt rattled. I remember shouting for my wife because I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It matched too closely. After that, I went into the Annalise Michel room, the one associated with the case that inspired the exorcism of Emily Rose. I only had a REM pod and a spirit box with me. I did what I'd been doing, provoking, challenging, pressing for a response. Then the spirit box started repeating, "Stupid, stupid, stupid," over and over. Same word, but it sounded like it was coming through in different voices. Then the device shut off. I tried toggling it, checking it, turning it back on. Nothing. It would not respond. I finally left the room and went to get a guide, and the moment I met her in the hallway, it came right back on and worked like nothing had happened. Still, the place that stayed in my head the most was the basement. That basement had gotten under my skin from the first trip, not because it terrified me, but because it didn't. That's what felt strange. It should have been the room that scared me most, but instead I felt weirdly calm down there, almost comfortable. We weren't getting much activity on the devices. At one point, my wife and I crouched down on the pentagram and asked, "Do you want us to sit here?" And then we heard it. A hiss. Loud. Very loud. Not subtle. Not airy. Not something I had to strain to hear. It was so sharp and so present that my wife immediately ran upstairs. It didn't sound like a snake. It sounded bigger than that. Harsher. More forceful. Almost like a large cat warning you off. But the more I thought about those explanations, the less confident I felt in any of them. Now, to be fair, I did debunk a lot of other things along the way. I don't want to make this sound like every flicker or noise became part of some grand, haunting narrative. Plenty of things had ordinary explanations. I'd feel a cold spot and realize there was a vent nearby. I'd get an EMF spike and find electrical equipment. There were sounds, taps, bells, little things that weren't strong enough to mean much. I even did my own test at one point. I hid a pencil in my jacket pocket and asked if anything there could tell me what I was carrying. I got nothing intelligent back. No meaningful hit. So I'm not pretending the whole place cracked open for me. But even with all that skepticism intact, a handful of moments stayed standing. And then we came home. This is the part I almost hate saying out loud, because it's the part that makes me sound like I've crossed over into the kind of story I'd normally interrogate. We had been home in North Carolina for one day. I found our wedding album shifted all the way to the edge of the table where it's displayed, like it had been nudged just enough to nearly fall, but not enough to actually hit the floor. At one point, I half-jokingly asked whatever might be there to move the chandelier. And right at that moment, the stack of bags sitting beneath it toppled over. My wife heard me clearly call her name while she was in the shower, but I wasn't even in the house. A few electronics around me started acting strangely too, glitching or malfunctioning in small ways. And what unsettles me most is not that any one of those things is impossible to explain. It's that each one stops just short of certainty, just short of proof. Almost as if, whatever this is, if it is anything, it knows exactly how far to go without giving itself away completely. That's the part that feels personal. Like it's playing at the edges. Like it's taunting me with plausible deniability. If the wedding album had been thrown to the floor, I'd have reacted differently. If the chandelier itself had moved, not the bags beneath it, that would have been different. But everything hovers in that maddening middle ground where a rational person can still argue with himself. And believe me, I am arguing with myself. So that's where I am now. I'm not here trying to sound special. I'm not trying to collect paranormal credibility points. My wife is genuinely scared, and I'm stuck in this uncomfortable place where logic is still my anchor, but the number of coincidences has started to feel heavy. I want this to be explainable. I really do. I want someone to tell me there's a clean answer, that I got caught in a perfect storm of atmosphere, suggestion, timing, and stress. I want to believe I'm just in my own head. But I also have to be honest with you. I went in expecting theater. I went back expecting to solve it. And I came home with a story I still can't reduce into something neat. If it was all a trick, then it was the most sophisticated one I've ever encountered. And if it wasn't, I honestly don't know what to do with that. I should probably start by saying that none of this felt completely impossible to me. My mother has always worked as a medium, so growing up around strange, spiritual moments made them feel less like horror stories and more like part of life. Still, until this happened, I had never been the one caught in the middle of something like that. It began when my grandfather was admitted to the hospital with a serious lung infection. Of course, all of us went to visit him. Around that same time, everyone at home was a little under the weather, but after those visits, I developed this odd cough. What was strange was that it only showed up in the evening, usually right after I showered, and then stayed with me until I went to sleep. Every single time. It felt too specific to ignore. At the same time, I was deep in college exam season, and honestly, not doing great. I was stressed, tired, and desperate for a little clarity, so I asked my mom to read my tarot cards. She started with one deck, but the answers coming through were all over the place. She kept frowning, saying she couldn't get a clear read on anything. It felt blocked somehow. So we decided to step outside and sit in the small back room near the yard, where she grabbed a different deck. The change was immediate. The answers became clearer, steadier. After a few questions, my mother got very quiet and said she thought something in the house had been interfering with the reading. Some presence. And I remember thinking that, weird as it sounded, it lined up with that strange cough I'd been having. Then everything shifted. When she tried to ask directly about whatever was there, she suddenly closed her eyes and started trembling. Her face tightened like she was in pain. She let out these soft, strange sounds that made my stomach drop. I kept asking if she was okay. I called her, said, "Mom, can you hear me?" But she didn't respond to me like herself. She just kept murmuring and wincing. This wasn't the first time I'd seen her go into a spiritual state, so somewhere in the middle of my panic, I realized it wasn't really my mother answering anymore. And for some reason, the first thing I asked was her name. She said her name was Marissa. I asked if she remembered anything else about herself. She said she was very old. Her voice sounded tired and confused, like someone trying to wake up from a dream that had gone on too long. I asked what the last thing she remembered was, and she said she saw people in pale uniforms. She remembered praying in a chapel. Then nothing. After that, she only remembered people walking past her, ignoring her, acting like they couldn't hear or see her. That was the moment it hit me. She didn't know she had died. There was no menace in her at all, no threat, just confusion, sadness, and this aching desperation. My mother was holding a pendulum, and at one point Marissa looked at it and said, so softly it almost broke me, "Look at my cross." She talked about her faith, about how much she had prayed, how sure she'd been that everything would be all right. But she couldn't understand why no one would speak to her. I told her as gently as I could that she wasn't meant to stay here with us anymore. I said I thought she was between places, and that maybe that was why everything felt so wrong to her. Then I told her I wanted to help. The response was instant. I asked what I could do, and before I could even think of anything else to say, she suddenly grew emotional in a different way. Hopeful, almost amazed. She said they were coming for her, that there were people there to take her. I have no idea who she meant. Maybe family, maybe something spiritual, maybe whatever waits for us when this life is over. I just kept telling her it was okay, that whoever she was seeing had come to help her, and that she should go with them. She thanked me again and again. She asked God to bless me. And then, little by little, the heaviness in the room seemed to lift. When my mother opened her eyes, she wiped her face and tried to piece together what had happened. She usually remembers at least part of what comes through when she's in that state, and she had a vague sense of it all. Our best guess was that Marissa had died in the hospital without understanding it, and somehow attached herself to one of us during those visits to my grandfather. Honestly, that explanation made more sense than anything else. I had felt something odd in the house for days. I'm sensitive too, though I'll admit those things unsettle me more than I'd like. And then comes the part that still makes me laugh a little. That same night, my cough almost disappeared. Within another day or two, it was gone completely. Just like that. So yes, I ended up thinking that Marissa had somehow been causing it, maybe echoing the symptoms she'd had while she was alive. Why only after a shower? I still couldn't tell you. Maybe she liked the bathroom. Maybe spirits are just as weird as the rest of us. In the end, my grandfather recovered and came home. I got through my exams better than I expected, and whatever that moment was, it ended gently. Marissa moved on, or at least I believe she did, and we stayed here, among the living, where we belong. Honestly, for a ghost story, it felt strangely tender, more bittersweet than terrifying. Almost like something out of a quiet fantasy film, instead of one of the many truly disturbing things I've seen growing up around all this. And I'm grateful for that. Not every encounter has to end in fear. Sometimes, I guess, it ends with someone finally finding their way home. Honestly, I still don't know how to explain any of this, and that's probably the part that gets under my skin the most. I'm from the US, but I've been living here in Thailand for a few years now. My wife is Thai, and we've got 2 little kids. Our oldest is still tiny, and our youngest was born not that long ago. A while back, we built a house out in the countryside, but things there started getting difficult in ways that were hard to ignore. So we decided to leave and move into a beach house owned by someone in my wife's family. It felt like a reset, a calmer place, somewhere we could finally breathe a little. But within maybe the first week or two, this awful smell started showing up in the house. Not all the time, just off and on. It smelled like rotten meat, like something had died somewhere nearby. I didn't say anything at first because I figured there had to be a normal explanation. We were right by the water, so I told myself maybe something had washed ashore. Maybe it was the drains, maybe garbage somewhere outside. Then my wife brought it up before I ever said a word, and I remember that really bothering me, because it meant I wasn't imagining it. Then things started going missing. My father-in-law was over one afternoon, and he took off his Apple Watch and left it on the dining table. We all saw it sitting there. Later on, maybe an hour or so after that, he went back for it and it was gone. Completely gone. We searched everywhere. The table, the chairs, drawers, couch cushions, the floor, every room nearby. Nothing. We have cameras inside the house, so I thought maybe our toddler had picked it up and wandered off with it. That would have made total sense. So we checked the footage. And that's where it got strange. You can see the watch sitting there on the table. Then as you scroll forward, at some point, it's just not there anymore. No one walks by and takes it. No little hand grabs it. There's no moment where it falls. It's just there, and then it isn't. We looked for 2 or 3 days. Me, my wife, her parents, even the house helper. Everybody looked. Then one morning, the watch was back on the table, just sitting there in plain sight. We checked the footage again, and somehow it seemed to be there like nothing had ever happened, like it had never been missing at all. I tried to tell myself we'd overlooked something. I really wanted that to be true. Then the same kind of thing happened with the TV remote. It disappeared in the middle of the day. We tore the room apart looking for it, lifted cushions, shook out blankets, checked under furniture, crawled around on the floor. It was nowhere. Then that evening, it was suddenly lying right in front of the television stand, out in the open, in a spot every one of us had crossed at least 20 times. There's no way we could have missed it. That was unsettling. But what really shook us was the freezer. My wife is breastfeeding and pumping, and we had a big freezer where we were storing all the milk. If you've ever seen someone go through that, you know how much effort it takes. It's exhausting. It's time, energy, sleep, all of it. It mattered a lot. One morning we woke up and found the freezer unplugged. We plugged it back in, and not long after that, the freezer stopped working entirely, just died. So we bought another one, brand new, hauled it home, set it up, moved everything over. And then a few days later, that one got unplugged too. By then, so much of my wife's stored milk was ruined. Weeks of work, gone. She was heartbroken and scared. And the truth is, I was scared too. I just didn't know how to say it out loud because I felt like I was supposed to be the calm one. That's the part I can't get past. We have cameras. We should be able to see something. But the footage keeps glitching at random times, or cutting out. And when we do catch something, there's nothing there to explain it. No person, no accident, no reason. I really thought moving houses would put an end to all the strange things we'd already been dealing with. Instead, it feels like whatever this is followed us here. And now it's not just unsettling anymore. I've got a little boy and a baby in this house. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I just want my family to feel safe. I want whatever this is to stop. I want to tell you something that still sits heavy on my chest, because even after all this time, I still do not have a clean explanation for it. Years ago, I was with a man named Darren. He was deeply abusive, and in 2016, he died from an overdose. While we were together, there was one night I will never forget. He grabbed me, threw me across the room, and I hit a table before landing hard on my back. Then he got on top of me and started choking me. He would not stop. I could not get free. My mom is the reason I survived that. He was a cruel person. Truly cruel. A couple of years after he died, I was living with my sister. Out of nowhere, she had started going through some severe mental health struggles. One night, everything had seemed completely normal until it suddenly was not. I cannot remember every detail clearly. Some of it feels blurred out, like my mind locked parts of it away. But I remember being in the kitchen when my sister, who was in her room with my brother-in-law, started acting in a way that terrified us. She kept saying she was Darren. Not Darren, not some vague reference, but him. She was calling for me, begging me to come into the room. And I need you to understand, she had never met him. She had only heard bits and pieces from me over the years. Not the full story, not the worst of it. She was crying out for me, saying she missed me, that she loved me, that she was sorry. She was screaming my name over and over, trying to come out of the room while my brother-in-law struggled to keep her back. She was gripping the door frame, fighting to get to me, and the whole thing felt wrong in a way I cannot fully describe. We did not know what to do. We were scared. Finally, because she kept begging for me, I went into the room. I wish I had not. Once I was in there, she started saying things she should not have known. She was speaking in his voice, or at least in the same way he used to speak to me. Then she said something specific, something I had never told her, something that hit me like ice water. There was no way she should have known it. We managed to get her onto the bed, and she wanted me to come closer. I was frightened, but I was also worried about her, so I sat beside her. And then, in an instant, she shoved me onto my back, climbed on top of me, and wrapped her hands around my throat. My brother-in-law had to pull her off me, and when I looked into her eyes, I saw the same darkness I had seen in his the night he tried to kill me. It was the exact same kind of hatred, the same emptiness, the same evil. That is the part I cannot make sense of. I still ask myself what happened that night. Was it really him somehow reaching through her? Was it something else pretending to be him? Was it a terrifying psychiatric break that happened to mirror my past in ways that feel impossible to explain? I do not know. What I do know is that I never got closure. My sister remembers none of it. She cannot explain it, cannot apologize for it, cannot help me understand it. But I remember. I remember all of it. And sometimes when I look at her, I do not just see my sister. I see the person who almost killed me. And that is a very hard thing to carry. So it was just me and my parents growing up. No brothers or sisters. Just the three of us. My dad had been working late shifts for a while, and we lived in a second-floor apartment with another family below us. For months, my mom had been dealing with sleep paralysis almost every night. She'd wake up and be completely unable to move or say anything. It scared her badly. Honestly, it scared me too. I'd been sleeping on a blanket on the floor in my parents' room because being near my mom made me feel safe. Not even both of them, really. Just her. Ever since we moved into that apartment, my mom and I had both noticed strange things. We'd catch dark shapes out of the corners of our eyes. Sometimes we'd hear voices that didn't seem to belong to anyone. The weirdest part was that my dad never experienced any of it. Not once. It was always just me and my mom. She told me that on nights when she couldn't sleep, she'd hear footsteps above us. That made no sense at all, because we were already on the top floor. There wasn't supposed to be anyone up there. Then one night, it was just the two of us. My dad was at work, and it was close to midnight. My mom and I were sitting up together watching an old movie, and for once the apartment felt calm. No shadows, no voices, no strange sounds. Just a quiet, peaceful night. Then we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. We both froze. My mom got up and looked through the peephole, but she didn't see anyone. She stood there for a second, confused, then opened the door, thinking maybe my dad had come home early and stepped away for some reason. But no one was there. She leaned out a little and called softly, "Jeremy, are you home?" Nothing. No answer. No footsteps on the stairs. Nothing at all. She shut the door, and the second it clicked closed, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, I could see the tension all over her face. She opened the door again, faster now, like maybe she'd catch someone there. Still nobody. By then, the whole hallway felt wrong. Too still, too empty. She closed the door again. Knock, knock, knock. I remember looking at her, and she looked completely shaken. She opened the door a third time and called out louder, her voice trembling. "Jeremy? Jeremy, is that you? Jeremy?" Nothing answered her. She slowly closed the door one more time. Then came the knocking again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, my mom turned and looked at me with this terrified expression I'll never forget. I tried to sound brave, even though I didn't feel brave at all. I told her, "Mom, open the door." She looked at me, pale and wide-eyed, and said in the quietest, most unsettling voice, "There's nobody there." I want to tell you a story from the part of Romania where I was raised, in a quiet little village tucked deep in Transylvania. Around there, people pass this story down the way they pass down prayers or warnings. Some say it sounds exaggerated. Maybe it does. But where I come from, nearly everyone knows it, and even now, all these years later, it still leaves a cold feeling in my chest. This happened about 50 years ago, maybe a little more. Back then, haymaking was a big part of village life. Families would cut the grass, leave it spread beneath the summer sun, then gather it into huge haystacks taller than a man, each one built around a thick wooden stake driven through the middle to hold it steady. The story was about a young, newlywed couple, Elena and her husband, who had gone up to one of the hills beyond the village to finish bringing in their hay. It was the kind of place that felt beautiful from a distance, but lonely once you stood in it. Open slopes, tangled brush, old trees at the edge of the forest, and not another person anywhere nearby. They worked side by side for a while, until, suddenly the husband told Elena he needed to hurry back to the village for something urgent. Before leaving, though, he grew strangely intense. His face changed. He warned her that once he was gone, something might come out of the woods. Maybe wild dogs, maybe wolves. He handed her a wooden pitchfork and told her very firmly, "As soon as I leave, climb to the top of the haystack, and if anything comes for you, don't hesitate. Hit it as hard as you can." So he left, disappearing down the path and into the trees. And then, just like that, everything went still. A few minutes later, Elena heard the brush shaking. Out from the thicket came a huge, ragged animal. Something like a dog, but not right. Too large, too wild-looking. Its fur was patchy, its body gaunt, and the sound coming out of it was more than a growl. People always said it sounded almost human in its rage. It threw itself at the haystack, clawing and snapping, trying to climb up to her, Elena screamed, cried, fought with everything she had. She jabbed at it with the pitchfork, kicked at its muzzle, struck at its head again and again. At one point, it lunged high enough to catch the bottom of her dress, tearing the red cloth before she finally drove it back. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it stopped. It looked up at her for one long, awful moment, then turned and slipped back into the trees. A little later, her husband came back. He asked what had happened, and Elena, still shaking, told him everything. He held her, soothed her, told her it was over now, that she was safe, that nothing was going to hurt her anymore. After a while, they sat down in the grass to rest. He seemed perfectly calm, even cheerful. He stretched out and laid his head in her lap, smiling up at her, making little jokes, trying to make her laugh again. And for a moment, she almost believed everything was fine. Then he laughed, a real open laugh. And there, caught between his teeth, were little strands of red thread. Tiny frayed fibers, bright as fresh blood, the exact same color as the fabric torn from her dress. That was the moment she understood. Whatever had attacked her on that hill had not been a wild animal at all. Or at least, not only that. You know, Transylvania is a beautiful place. The hills are lovely, the forests are deep and ancient, and the villages can feel untouched by time. But stories like this stay with people for a reason. Because sometimes the thing that means you harm doesn't come out of the woods. Sometimes it walks home beside you. I want to tell you something that's been passed down in my family for generations. Something people in my village never treated like a joke. I grew up in a small, remote village deep in Transylvania, where old superstitions still breathe right alongside everyday life. Some of the stories people tell are easy to dismiss, and some of them feel more like tired folklore than anything else. But there was one rule nobody in my family ever broke, especially around the summer solstice. My grandmother, my parents, everyone raised me with the same warning. If you're crossing a bridge over water on a June night, never look back. No matter who calls your name. No matter what you think you heard. Just keep walking. People believed that if you turned around, you might catch sight of the dead, especially the souls of those lost during the coldest part of the year. The story I'm about to share happened to my grandfather, Stefan, back during the communist years, when the countryside felt even darker than it does now. Electricity was unreliable, and most nights whole stretches of the village disappeared into blackness. A few homes still burned kerosene lamps, but outside of that, there was almost no light at all. He was only a teenager then, walking home sometime after 2 in the morning from his sweetheart's house. In our village, a wide river divides one side from the other, and there's an old bridge crossing it, maybe 10 meters long or so. Back then, that whole area was nearly empty. No streetlights, hardly any houses. Just darkness before the bridge, darkness after it, and the river moving beneath. That night, the moon was full and bright enough to light the path. He didn't need a lantern. But just before stepping onto the bridge, he felt this sharp, unnatural cold wrap around him. Not the kind of chill you get from night air, but something that seemed to come from nowhere. He kept going. All he could hear at first was the water below him. Then, when he reached the middle of the bridge, he heard his mother's voice behind him, clear as day, calling his name. Now, Stefan was young and stubborn. He didn't believe much in spirits or warnings, and because of that, he made the one mistake everyone had warned him about. He turned around. There was nobody there. And the second he looked back, everything changed. The river went silent. The wind stopped. Even the night itself seemed to freeze. He said it was like the whole world had suddenly held its breath. In that moment, he knew he had done something terribly wrong. He still had a long way to go before reaching home, close to 2 miles, and much of that path cut through an open field with only a few scattered trees. He kept walking, but fear had already gotten into him. His heart was hammering, and every few steps he felt the urge to look around. Then, at one point, he looked ahead and stopped cold. A short distance in front of him were 2 little girls, maybe 7 or 8 years old, walking hand in hand. They wore long white dresses that covered their feet completely, so from where he stood, it looked as though they were gliding over the road instead of walking. They never turned to face him, not once. Then they began to sing. He told us it was in a language he had never heard before. Not Romanian, not Hungarian, not anything he could recognize. The sound of it made his skin crawl. He stayed to the right side of the road, and so did they at first. Then slowly, the 2 figures drifted toward the left side, and as they moved, something about them began to change. He said that was the moment real terror hit him, but he also knew he couldn't stop. Somehow he understood that if he froze, if he gave in to panic, he might never make it home. So he kept walking and began repeating the only prayer he knew, over and over in his mind, while making the sign of the cross again and again. He didn't run. He just kept moving. And just before he reached the house, the 2 figures crossed back to the right side of the road. As they moved, they shrank down again, becoming child-sized once more. Then they let go of each other's hands and ran off in opposite directions, one into the darkness on the left, the other into the dark on the right, both of them screaming words he could not understand. Stefan got inside and shut the door behind him. What shook him almost as much as everything else was the clock on the wall. He swore the walk had felt normal, maybe a little longer because of fear, but nothing impossible. Yet when he looked up, it was already 6 in the morning. 4 hours gone. And to this day, in my family, nobody looks back on a June night when crossing water. Nobody. I want to tell you about a few strange things that happened to me growing up, and even now, I still can't explain all of them. The first one goes back to when I was about 14. I had invited a few friends to our vacation house for the weekend. It's a big old place, the kind with too many rooms and corners that always seem a little darker than the rest. There was one bedroom in particular with a narrow door half hidden behind the wall, and behind it we kept boxes of ornaments, winter blankets, and all sorts of forgotten things. We were playing hide and seek, except backwards, with one person hiding and everyone else searching. So a few of us went into that room to look around, and then one of my friends suddenly said, "Do you remember that time, right here, when we heard a baby crying?" And I just looked at her, completely confused, because no, I did not remember that at all. But 2 other friends immediately agreed and said it had happened during one of my birthday weekends. They even claimed they had recorded it. I never actually saw the recording, so I can't swear it happened exactly the way they said. But what really stayed with me was the fact that there was definitely no baby in the house. The second thing happened in our old house. My parents had already left for work by the time I woke up, so I was alone. I always used to leave my bedroom door cracked open a little so my cat could come and go. But that morning, when I opened my eyes, the door was wide open. At first, I thought maybe my parents had pushed it open before leaving, so I didn't think too much of it. I got up, went to shower, and left the bathroom door slightly open too. There was a towel hanging in front of part of the doorway, so I couldn't really see it while I was inside. But when I stepped out of the shower, the door was standing open all the way again. My cat wasn't there. And honestly, even if she had been, there's no way she could have pushed it that far. Maybe a window was open. Maybe there was a draft. That's the explanation I still try to give myself. But after that, things started feeling harder to explain. One Wednesday afternoon, in that same old house, I was home alone before theater club. I was in my room playing Roblox and talking to a friend on the phone. Then, out of nowhere, I heard these huge thuds from the room above me. Not little noises. I mean real, heavy booms, like someone was dragging a bookcase or slamming furniture across the floor. 5 times in a row. Boom, 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 boom. Then silence. I actually stood up and started toward the stairs, but halfway there I stopped. I just had this awful feeling and decided I wasn't brave enough to check. So I left early for theater instead. Later that night, nobody in my family mentioned anything broken upstairs. No shelf had fallen. No furniture was out of place. Nothing. Then there was the doll. This one was short, but I still hate thinking about it. I was at my grandparents' house with my best friend. In one of the upstairs rooms, there was a closet with this old doll inside. Its eyes had been melted years earlier when my grandmother was a child, which somehow made it even worse. I remember joking with my friend, saying, "There's a terrifying doll with ruined eyes in that closet." And right after I said it, the closet door opened a few inches on its own. That was enough for us. We ran downstairs so fast I'm surprised we didn't fall. We were just standing there talking, and then suddenly we heard this scream, loud, sharp, and coming from the direction of the buildings. I turned to Maëlle, and she was already staring at me with this terrified look. We didn't even need to ask each other if the other one had heard it. We both knew. We just froze for a second, then ran back as fast as we could. We asked one of the camp leaders what had happened. She had no idea what we were talking about. We asked other people too. No one had heard anything. That part still unsettles me most. Not the scream itself, but the fact that it felt so real to both of us, and somehow nobody else noticed it. And then there's the story we ended up calling the squatter. This one happened last summer at the vacation house. I was in my room around 11 at night, waiting for my dad to come home because he usually came to say goodnight. The house has 2 main floors, and my room is upstairs. My brothers were away, so I was the only one sleeping on that level. A little after 11, I heard the front door close and my parents talking downstairs. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps in the upstairs corridor right outside my room. Heavy footsteps. I honestly thought it was my dad, because that's exactly what it sounded like. Slow, weighty steps. But then they stopped. Just stopped. I remember lying there, staring at the dark, telling myself not to jump to weird conclusions. Then, a few minutes later, the footsteps started again. A short stretch, then silence. I can't clearly remember whether it happened a third time, but I know I barely slept. The next morning, I asked my dad if he had come upstairs during the night. He said no. My mom didn't really believe me at first, but the name stuck anyway, and we started calling whatever it was, the squatter. A few days later, one of my brothers came home. We were sitting at the table, and somehow my mom brought it up. My dad joked that maybe he should cleanse my room, but my brother immediately said, "It's not in your room, it's in the hallway." The thing is, I had never told him that part. Then my dad mentioned the attic, and both my brother and I said at the same time, "No, not the attic, the hallway." That really got to me. My brother has always claimed he can sense things, energies, presences, whatever word you want to use. My dad says the same. Months later, a family friend came by, someone who also says she can see spirits and feel energies. I told her about the squatter. She walked through the house, paused near the corridor, and told me there was something there, but that it felt neutral, not harmful. She said she cleared it. And the strangest part is that the next time my brother visited, before I said much at all, he told me the hallway felt different, lighter, like whatever had been there was gone. I still don't know what to believe. Some of these things could have ordinary explanations. Maybe the doors were drafts. Maybe the noises were the house settling. Maybe fear made everything feel bigger and stranger than it was. But some moments still stay with me in a way I can't shake. Not because I'm certain they were paranormal, but because I was there, and I know what I heard, what I saw, and what I felt. And sometimes, that uncertainty is the part that lingers the longest. I need to tell you about something that's been messing with my head for the past few days, because honestly, I still can't make sense of it. A couple of nights ago, my friend Lena and I took my dog out for our usual walk. It was the same route we always take, the kind of path you know so well you could probably walk it with your eyes closed. We met up by our regular bus stop, and were just standing there talking like normal when I noticed this guy in white run past us. And I mean, completely in white. Hoodie, pants, everything. Lena saw him too, so I know I didn't imagine it. He slowed down near the bus stop for a second, almost like he was deciding whether to stop, and then he was just gone. At first we tried to laugh it off. We told ourselves he was probably just some runner cutting through. But deep down, it didn't feel normal. There was something off about the way he moved, and the way he seemed to disappear so suddenly made my stomach tighten. Still, we kept walking and tried to brush it off. Then the next night, we went back around the same time. I guess part of us wanted to prove it was nothing, just a weird moment we'd overthought. We were talking about it, trying to keep things light, but I could feel that nervous energy sitting between us. Then, out of nowhere, this drunk-looking man came stumbling down the path. He was mumbling under his breath, loud enough to notice but not clear enough to understand. He passed us, and I instantly got that same uneasy feeling all over again. And right after that, another man showed up running. Fast. Not from the same direction either. Totally different side. Lena and I just froze and watched him. And just like the first night, he disappeared. Just gone. Like the dark swallowed him whole. A few seconds later, the drunk guy was nowhere to be seen either. At that point, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Nothing about it made sense. This was a route we knew inside and out. There wasn't anywhere obvious for them to go that quickly. So we decided to head home. We said goodbye near this little bridge by the bus stop, the one that goes over the creek by the woods. We were trying to act normal, just dap each other up and shake off the fear, when we heard this sound from underneath the bridge. It was this slow, scraping noise, harsh, deliberate, like something dragging across metal. Lena and I looked at each other, and that was it. We didn't even have to say anything. We just ran. And then, when I thought we were finally putting distance between us and whatever was happening, I heard it. Someone running out from the woods. Not random movement, not an animal. Footsteps. Fast, controlled, coming from the side of the trail that leads toward Lena's street. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. My dog was pulling at the leash like he felt it too, like he knew we needed to get out of there. When I finally got close to home, I was already trying to calm myself down, telling myself once I got through the gate, I'd be fine. And I know, without a doubt, that I had locked it before I left. I always lock it. But as I walked up, I heard the gate slam. My whole body went cold. Nobody in my family had gone outside. Nobody had any reason to be near it. But when I got to the house, the gate was standing wide open. I asked everyone inside, and they all said the same thing. No one touched it. No one had been out there. What really gets to me is this feeling that the man in white, or whatever that was, is connected to all of it. Like he isn't just passing through. like he's checking whether we're paying attention. And now, I don't know what to trust anymore. Every time we go near that route, my stomach knots up before we even get there. I feel watched. I feel paced, like something knows exactly where we walk and exactly when we'll be there. I can't explain it. I just know something is out there, and whatever it is, it doesn't feel far away. I've told this story a few times, and every single time, it still feels unreal coming out of my mouth. Even now, years later, I can picture it like it happened last night. I know how strange it sounds, but I lived it, and another person lived it with me. We went over it again and again, trying to make sense of it, and in the end, we both landed in the same place. It was the most unsettling thing either of us had ever been through. This happened sometime around the mid-2000s, when I was working summers at a little cabin resort tucked away in the Rockies. It was one of those quiet places surrounded by tall pines, cold river water, and long stretches of silence that felt peaceful during the day and a little too deep at night. The first summer I worked there, I got to know a kid about my age named Mikey. His family came up every year, and over time we became friendly. A couple summers later, just before my senior year, I went up early to help the owners with repairs, cleanup, and cutting fallen timber. I stayed on site for a few weeks, working long days and sleeping in one of the cabins. After about a week, Mikey showed up with his family, along with a few other relatives who were supposed to stay for several days. But not long after, most of them headed home. Mikey had driven himself that year, so he decided to hang back. One night, the two of us were sitting outside by the fire, drinking a little, smoking, just winding down the way teenagers do when they think they understand the world better than they actually do. I got tired first and decided to turn in early, while Mikey stayed out by the fire. At some point later, I woke up to the sound of voices. At first, I thought maybe it was one of the owners, or a guest from another cabin, or maybe one of Mikey's family members who had come back unexpectedly. But when I stepped outside, that wasn't what I saw at all. Standing there by the fire was a man I had never seen before. He was dressed in this worn, ragged robe that instantly made me think of some old painting of Jesus, but there was nothing gentle or holy about him. He carried a long walking stick wrapped with bits of cloth and charms, and he had this rough, hardened mountain man presence, like someone who had been living outside for years. He told us he'd been hiking the Continental Divide for a long time, drifting south little by little, working odd jobs in towns when he had to, eventually making his way toward the desert. I was young and reckless back then. If someone offered me something, I usually didn't ask enough questions. At some point, this guy pulled out a carved stone pipe and packed it with something that looked like dried herbs, maybe resin, maybe something darker. I'd already experimented with enough stuff in those years to think I understood altered states. I did not even close. A minute or two after I took a hit, everything changed. I remember reaching for a cigarette and suddenly feeling like it had jumped into my mouth before my hand even got there. That was the first moment I realized something was deeply wrong. I told myself, "Right, okay, you just smoked something weird. Stay calm." Then I reached for my lighter, and it looked like it was floating. Not falling, not slipping, floating. That's when I decided I needed to lay back and ride it out. As I leaned away from the fire, I saw the stranger standing over Mikey. The flames were bending and wobbling in my vision. The crackling sounded warped, almost musical, and the man was chanting something low and strange. Then everything went black. The next thing I remember is waking up alone. Both of them were gone. And that's when the memory came rushing back. The pipe. The chanting. Mikey. The man. I grabbed a flashlight and went back outside. The resort had several cabins spaced through the trees, and because I worked there, I remember thinking I couldn't just start yelling like a maniac in the middle of the night. So I started walking toward the small bridge that crossed the river and connected the property to the main road. By then, I was sober enough to be scared. I swept the flashlight ahead of me, and when I got close to the bridge, I saw them. The man was standing near the railing. Mikey was above him, balanced up on the rail, staring out over the rushing black water below like he was about to jump. I shouted immediately. I didn't even think. I just yelled, "What are you doing?" The stranger snapped his head toward me so fast it barely looked human. Maybe it was the flashlight. Maybe it was the adrenaline. But I swear to you, in that moment, his eyes looked red. Not irritated, not reflecting light strangely. Red, bright and wrong and animal. He looked at me for half a second, turned back toward Mikey, and then took off. He didn't hesitate. He ran across the far side of the bridge, up into the dark, into thick woods and steep ground like it was nothing. I could hear gravel crunching, branches snapping, brush thrashing, and then he was just gone. Completely gone. I never saw him again. Mikey was still up there on the rail, and then he started screaming. Not yelling, not calling out. Screaming. I ran to him and kept asking what was happening, but when he turned and looked at me, the expression on his face stopped me cold. I've seen fear before. Everyone has. But this was different. It was the face of someone who had woken up inside a nightmare and didn't know how he got there. He climbed down, and the second his feet hit the ground, he broke. He grabbed onto me and cried so hard he could barely breathe. I honestly didn't know him that deeply back then. We were just two teenage guys who had spent a few summers around each other, talking about random stuff and passing time. But in that moment, none of that mattered. We just walked back together in silence, both shaken to the core. Neither of us slept. We stayed up until sunrise trying to piece together what had happened. The next day, Mikey told me what he remembered. After I had gone into sleep, he stayed outside feeding the fire. At some point, he stepped away to grab a jacket and another drink. When he came back, the stranger was already there, standing by the flames. At first, Mikey thought it might be me, just from the shape of him and the way he was positioned, but as soon as he got closer, he knew it wasn't. The man started talking to him. At first, it was just strange conversation, the kind where you think somebody's eccentric and maybe harmless. But then it got darker. He said he was searching for Eden. He talked about building some kind of new, holy place. The more he spoke, the less sense he made. Then I woke up and joined them. Mikey remembered both of us smoking from the pipe. He said he saw me lean back like I was fading out, but then, according to him, I sat upright again and stayed there while the man kept chanting over us. He said it sounded like nonsense, but not random nonsense. More like sounds meant to do something. Sharp, clicking, whispering noises that didn't feel human when they came out of his mouth. After that, Mikey blacked out too. And then he woke up on the bridge, staring down at the river, with this overwhelming feeling of dread and certainty that if he moved the wrong way, he was dead. I still don't know what we smoked. I don't know who that man was, what he wanted, or whether he'd done something like that before. Maybe there's an explanation buried somewhere in psychology or chemistry, or the darkness people carry around inside themselves. Maybe there isn't. What I do know is this: there is real beauty in the world, but there is real horror too. Both are closer than we like to admit. So I try to remember that story not just as a warning, but as a reason to stay grounded, stay kind, and hold on tight to the people beside you when the night turns strange.